A quorum present, I'll call to order the February 11th meeting of the Historic Landmarks Commission. First item on the agenda is public comment. If there's any member of the public that wishes to speak to the commission on an item that is not on our agenda today, please come forward. Hello, Mr. Miller.
How are you?
Fine, thank you.
Sort of in celebration of having our stipend restored, but also kind of in realization of what our boards are and how important they are, and how I felt we need to kind of rediscover why we're here and what created these boards. And it just so happened I was at a bookstore downtown, and I saw this book about Pearl Chase, which I'm sure you'd be very appreciative of.
Put it on screen here.
And it's a very, very well-written book. It's short, it's easy reading, and so in celebration of who we are in this community and the great work that we do to make this community the way it is, and she was sort of the instigator and the person that really created this whole concept of architectural review. I've gotten a special deal from the author, so I've been passing it out to all the boards. So if you please indulge me, I want to give you each one of these great little books.
You have a project on today's agenda, do you?
Thank you much.
Thank you.
How nice.
That's very nice of you.
Thank you so
Very, very nice.
Extremely.
I have one already.
I guess we'll have to go home and read it.
All right,
And
thank you.
educate them.
Great.
Nice.
And that's
Thank you.
my announcement. Thank you.
Thank you,
That was a
Mr.
nice one.
Miller.
And
Yes.
continue
Thank
the
you
good work.
very
Thank
much.
you.
Great.
I've heard it said that Pearl Chase was the only person in town that could put the fear of God into Tom Stork.
Yes.
That's great.
Seeing no other public, I'll close public comment and go for a motion to approve the minutes of the Historic Landmarks Commission meeting of January 28th,
So
2015.
moved.
We have a motion by Murray, second by Mahan. Under discussion, any additions, corrections, clarifications? Yes, Commissioner Mahan.
I have I don't know if it's a correction or not.
Clarification, maybe?
It's a sentence smithing on page 11.
Make sure your microphone.
Excuse me. On page 11, item number 6 of the motion, where it says, show how the sculpture will be lit on the plans. I think it should say, show on the plans how the sculpture will be lit.
Okay.
Correct.
Okay. We don't want to light the plans.
Right.
Okay. Any other additions, corrections, or clarifications? Excellent job on the minutes, by the
Yes,
way.
thank you very
As
much.
usual. Okay, all in favor of the minutes as amended?
Aye.
I am
Opposed?
abstaining from
Abstain.
item 3.
Abstain.
We have one abstention from the whole. That's Commissioner Arias. Another abstention from the whole, Commissioner
Winnick.
Winnick, and one abstention from item 3, Commissioner Murray. Consent calendar. Ms. Hernandez, or Ms. Kaufman. God, why am I so bad with names right now?
Item A, 9 West Victoria Street, final approval as submitted. Item B, 514 State Street, final approval with conditions. Item C, 621 Anacapa Street, final approval as submitted. Item D, final approval, 202 State Street, final approval with conditions. Item E, 324 State Street, final approval with conditions. Item F, 924 Garden Street B, final approval as submitted. Item G, 27 East Coda Street, final approval with conditions. Items A through E were reviewed by Commissioner Mahan. Items F and G were reviewed by Chair Suding.
Okay. Do I have a motion to ratify the consent
moved.
calendar? Motion by Winnick,
Second.
second by Murray. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstain. Thank you, Commissioner Mahan, for doing the bulk of the consent calendar. It's appreciated.
You're welcome.
Next are announcements. Any requests by applicants for continuances, anything that the commission needs to be aware of that is upcoming on The Planning Commission, City Council, Parks and Rec, Ms. Kaufman.
Commissioners Drury and Commissioner Schellenberger will be absent.
How about Commissioner Lavoy?
I have not received
Okay.
word of his absence.
Thank you. Any other announcements?
Yes.
Yes.
I have quite a few for you today, actually. The first is that we did receive a revised version of the Historic Structures Report for 121 East Mason and 121 Santa Barbara Street, which was completed by Mr. James Sved. He did make a major correction, and he did correctly cite that the history section, images, and bibliography were quoted from the history report, which was written by Post Hazeltine. And that was not on the version that you saw, but it is on the final version.
Okay.
The next announcement is that the ABR did review and approve a new sculpture in front of the new airport terminal. That is 45 feet away from the original historic terminal, the side elevation. So we felt it does not have a negative impact or block any main views of the terminal. But I do have plans if anybody wanted to see them that the ABR approved. The next is that the 3 landmarks were designated by City Council. Those were the Joseph Knowles mural, the First Church of Christ Scientist, and the Montjuïc. Those were designated on February 3rd, 2015. And finally, the Franceschi Flame Tree, which is a city landmark, has fallen. And
it did.
yes, there will be so we do need to remove it from the landmark list. And Tim Downey is going to be sending you a forthcoming memo as to what happened.
Do we know how the propagation is coming along?
I just know that they're doing one with the cuttings from the original tree and putting it there. But
I just saw it 4 days ago. 5 days
Right, it
ago.
just fell. And then the subcommittee, the designation subcommittee did meet, and I'll let them report to you some information on the proposed designation of the walls to be included in the Mission Park landmark designation when that comes up.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right.
Did anyone want to see these plans for the wings?
You can take a look at it at your leisure. Commissioner Arias, and you got an announcement?
The point that I raised about the airport was covered very well. Thank you. I watched it on TV and was concerned about the closeness to the airport terminal.
Great. Thank you.
Mr. Chair?
Commissioner Mahan.
Yeah, for the February 25th meeting that day, I will not be able to do consent calendar in the morning. I've got a medical thing involved.
Who's our alternate?
Winnick.
Who's our alternate for consent?
Next one's the 25th, isn't it?
I don't know. I don't have that.
We'll have to look that up.
Okay, staff,
Yeah.
if you please be sure aware that the alternate will be covering the February 25th.
Yes, I've
Consent.
made note.
Great, thank you. Any other announcements?
I won't be here on the 25th either.
Okay, so we're 2 down on the 25th, Mahan and Vena.
You may be back for the. Will you be back?
I'll be
for
back
board?
for the regular meeting.
You will.
He's
Okay.
just down.
I just won't.
Down
Just,
for
just can't
consent.
do the consent calendar in the
One
morning.
absence from the regular Vena, one absence from consent, Mahan.
I do have one question, sir.
Yes, Commissioner Arias.
This is income tax season, and we are now getting stipends. And as of today, there was no indication from the city as to how much we had received in the past year.
No 1099.
No 1099 or
Yeah,
anything.
I think if the amount is less than
5,000.
5,000, they do not notify
You do not? Okay. It's
Five,
less
not
than
600?
5,000. Just a
Yeah,
bit.
just a bit.
Oh.
Is it 5,000? I thought it was 4, but okay.
It's going down.
No other announcements. Subcommittee reports. Any subcommittees meet in the past 2 weeks?
I just have to report that we met today regarding various issues as far as historical landmarks are concerned. And in addition to that, I just wanted to report that the City Council, of course,
Click on Julio.
pardon me?
Your microphone may be turned off or on mute.
Yeah, start again. Anyway, we met today regarding the various historic landmarks and which are going to be or not to be, or to be reviewed anyway. A lengthy list, to be sure. In addition to that, we found that that the commission or the city council has accepted the study or the request for a study of the Mission Area road and the straightening of the road there and the walls and so forth. And so, as such, I'm sure there'll be other studies that it'll trigger, and I'm sure we'll be hearing about studies from now until some time to come. So,
Good.
that's all I have to report.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Vina. Any other subcommittee reports? Commissioner Murray?
I just want to add a couple more points from the designation subcommittee meeting, and that is the landmarks. The landmark approval at the city council have had really poor attendance from the commission. Last time it was just Nicole and Jaime attended the last hearing, and these are our highest awards to the community. So designations. So we've got to come up with some way for the next batch of 3 or 4 nominations are coming up in June or so. We would be coming to the commission to really find a way to beef up our presence, to invite the community, the owners, because this is a huge celebration, and we just sort of make it just an administrative thing. I just think we need to do better.
Okay.
Anyway, so that will be coming.
Maybe what we can do is have a rotating group of people for each designation.
Yeah, some huge
the one
presence.
coming up in June, have 3 commissioners commit to attending, and then the next one, 3 other commissioners commit to attending, so that it's not always the same commissioners. I think that would be
Anyway, we'll
good.
just want to bring that up.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you, Commissioner Murray.
Mr. Chair,
Commissioner
I'd
Mahan.
also like to report that last week at the city council meeting, we did distribute the awards. I think that was last week, wasn't it?
Yes, it was. It was last Tuesday.
And it was very, very well attended, and it was quite a celebration. We gave a St. Barbara Award both to Brian Cornell and Don Sharp. We gave award to the Victoria Street Theater,
That was the George Washington Smith.
George Washington Smith Award. We gave the new Edwards and Plunkett Award to the Crocker No. 5 house of Harrison Design, and the owner wanted to remain anonymous. And then we gave the Lockwood DeForest Award to Katie O'Reilly Rogers, which I believe was given to you, and you were to deliver it to Katie, and to Courtney Miller, and then to the owners of the El Encanto. Very, very, very nice ceremony, and well attended, and lots of applause and lots of fun.
And I heard you went out for drinks afterwards.
We went out for a drink afterwards, and that lasted till about midnight.
Yeah, you painted the town red. Huh?
Day drink, yeah.
All right, next item on the agenda is item number 1. It's a discussion item about noticing procedures. We have Mr. Lamone, Design Review Supervisor. Mr. Lamone.
You want one on the screen?
You want to help?
Oh, you've got one? Okay. I was going to donate, I guess. By all means.
Commissioners, my name is Jaime Limon. I'm the senior planner, and the purpose of this discussion today is to go over briefly in a summary of the city's noticing requirements. And I believe it was requested as a result of some problems that we've received with the Olive Street project recently, where there was some concerns about the city's lack of notice. That project has been appealed to City Council, so I'd like to stay away from specifics about that, but I can raise the common type of issues that come up with noticing, so we'd like to walk you through that. We put together a presentation with the assistance of Joanna here.
This is also for the benefit of the public that is watching.
That's correct.
Doing their wash.
So I'm going to just outline briefly what the city does. There's what we call a required mailed notice that's required for major planning decisions. And typically, communities are required by state law to deal with providing all parties or property owners that will be directly affected by development, and those are typically in close proximity, and the standard typically is a 300-foot radius. We've also passed out a handout that shows you the types of distances that are required for these types of notices. Also, in consideration of these types of decisions, we do have what we call an interested parties list of individuals or groups or organizations that have requested that they be notified based on the type of application and whether they're being impacted in their area of the city. The typical type of notice that we send out is a mailed notice, which includes the time, place, location, and an opportunity for specific parties to either provide written comments or come to the hearings and offer verbal comments through the public comment period. The normal time frame is, in the state law, is 10 days in advance. They're supposed to receive this written notice. So the calendar days typically are the trigger for us to get a notice out in the mail. And we do have deadlines internally. There is a lot of pressure sometimes for applicants to try to get an agenda, a notice out in time so they can get on an agenda. Mm-hmm. If we don't meet that 10-day period, they will not get on an agenda. So you understand how the applicants are concerned about us meeting those deadlines. There are different types of noticing that are required for coastal development permits. There are specific noticing requirements. And there's also tenant noticing that's part of that requirement. Now, that's required noticing, and what I wanted to distinguish between that type of noticing is, can you get the next slide, is the additional noticing methods that the city of Santa Barbara has created as part of an ordinance update several years ago, where the community felt that there was not enough notice being provided. And they asked that there be additional ways to not only notify the required distance type of notice, but also provide an ability to have on-site posting. So again, several years ago, we created the yellow placard out to be posted on the site to alert not only the close proximity neighbors, but the whole neighborhood that there is something being proposed. And we feel that's worked very, very well. It gets a broader radius of people that could be somewhat interested in what's going on that property. The City Council also directed us to expand during the NPO update to include tenants that may be affected by single-family development applications. And that's where we developed the hand-delivered requirement for the 10 closest neighbors, where it was clearly understood that if you speak to your neighbor about the proposal, that there will be less controversy, possibly confrontation, knowing that you've had that outreach with the neighborhood and your close neighbors. That's actually some of the language that we've included in our guidelines for our good neighbor policies, to go out and talk to your neighbors. Because what we don't want is applicants coming in and meeting their neighbors for the first time here. That's not the type of interaction we want. And because there have been concerns about privacy and view impacts, those issues should be discussed with the neighbors to give them an understanding how you designed your project. So those are additional means to an outreach that are provided by the city. Now, one of the things that people don't realize is that we actually put a specific warning in our ordinance that says, failure of any person or entity to receive notice given pursuant to these additional noticing methods shall not constitute grounds for any court to invalidate the actions of the city for which notice was given. In other words, if we have problems where the applicant does not go out and do the required posting as he promised, because we have actually affidavits that are signed by the applicant saying, I promise to go out and post the site. I make a commitment to go contact the neighbors and do this hand delivery. The city does not do it. We rely on the applicants to do it. So this is our form of saying we're doing our best, but the neighborhood cannot claim they didn't get the hand-delivered notice or that the yellow placard is not posted at the adequate time sequences. We require that the yellow placard be placed 10 days in advance of the hearing, of each hearing. And if there is a zoning modification or planning commission hearing that's subsequent to the design review hearing, that it is required to be placed at that time. Now, some persons or applicants choose to take it down after the hearing. We recommend they keep it up. We get more complaints about people saying, well, they took the sign down. Why are they taking, or they're trying to not tell the neighborhood that. And so our idea is to have that yellow placard up all the way through the planning level decisions, up to the point where you get final approval. Mm-hmm. And we do occasionally have some issues with that.
I have a question on the notification to the tenants and
Yes.
occupants. Typically in the past, if you're renting, you don't really have a voice on the proposal, whether it's for or against. How does that work now? If you're noticing tenants, do they now have a specific set of rights?
No, I think it was more realizing that there were a lot of renters in the city.
Yes.
And that there could be a concern about privacy, that those people who live in these homes have that same expectation that their privacy impacts might be evaluated with any type of development. And if you have an absentee owner, there's not as much concern. Therefore, City Council took the extra step of saying these renters do have some say in possible impacts to the way they live and
so that say or
so.
that voice is really related to privacy?
I believe so. I think that was the major emphasis.
Anywhere? I mean, because a tenant doesn't really have a vested interest in the property other than that they live there and they've been paying rent and so on and so forth. But I just wondered how that works with the voice that they have and how that voice is heard.
Well, it's heard by the fact that they're aware of it, because as you...
well, how do we as a commission hear that voice? I mean, I get that they come in, but how much weight do we have on that?
As with any concern, no matter which concern that's brought, who brings the concern forward, you have to determine whether it falls within your criteria. And privacy impacts is one of the criteria under the single-family design guidelines. So whether it's the owner who owns it or the renter who lives there, they say they're being impacted, so you need to have some weight associated with that.
Is that what everybody understood?
Mm-hmm. Mr. Chair,
Yeah,
you're thinking too much about the Historic Landmarks Commission. These notices go out for Single Family Design Board, for Planning Commission, for ABR. Tenants are also concerned about traffic. They're concerned about parking. They're concerned about noise, besides privacy. So they have a lot of issues that they have the right to bring those to the appropriate board or commission and air their concerns. And then, of course, the board or the commission makes a prudent decision based on public input.
Okay.
Right, they're an interested party, essentially, by the proximity to the development. Do you have a question?
Just a point. There's no mention that I see of story poles.
I can get into that. We didn't include that as part of the presentation, but the story polls is an optional form of noticing to alert neighbors of the height impacts or the bulk and scale of a project. It's not necessarily a requirement, as you know, for design review purposes, but Planning Commission has historically been requesting that as the means to alert for their decision-making process. So sometimes we do have a conflict where our review boards do not have a benefit of reviewing the story polls until later in the process, and you've already commented on the process. But we, as a standard protocol, we advise you when story polls are erected. You might have a change of opinion based on seeing the story polls, but sometimes it isn't later in the process.
All right. Sorry to interrupt you. Continue.
So what's I wanted to emphasize here is that since interested parties do come into our process, they fill out the form, they do need to opt in and ask to be an interested party. In other words, that there is a ability for them to be noticed to the degree of sending an agenda out on next subsequent hearings. And what people feel where they don't get adequate notice is because they expect that same 10-day notice period for subsequent meetings. And unfortunately, because of the quick quickness of how applicants can get on agendas, we do not provide that same 10-day notice. So subsequent meetings, sometimes applicants feel they didn't get adequate time to be aware that there's a hearing. And it's very apparent where single-family design board meetings are, where we get agendas possibly get out on a Thursday or Friday morning, and Monday is the hearing. Sometimes they get mail. We hear they get mail that same day or Tuesday. So people are frustrated. We hear that, but unless we change the cycle for people, and architects would not feel like we're timely if we were to say you need to wait 3 weeks to get on an agenda. So it behooves the applicants and interested parties to be aware of these type of processes, that if an item is continued 2 weeks, it's likely it's going to come back in 2 weeks. They should call the city and say, when is this item scheduled? Also, we've introduced a specific new ability for them to request an email to be sent.
Oh, fantastic.
Because we had that problem.
That's
Persons were getting agendas and saying, why don't you just email me? Well, the dynamics is not that easy when you consider how we have to deal with mail notices, mail agendas, and then they also want us to email them. We are trying to get this information out. We've developed a system to allow for that, but it makes our admin secretaries' jobs a little difficult to maintain all this information and get this out in the timely manner that they seek.
I think individual chairs of the commissions and boards could also help if they are getting a lot of public speaker slips during a item, and that item is continued 2 weeks. Then it would be helpful if the chair spoke to the public directly and said, we want you to be aware that this will be here most likely be here next week, or
2 weeks. Right, next meeting. Or check with staff.
Or check with staff.
Yeah.
So that sort of interaction, they came to the meeting, the chair, I think, would be
It's a good idea.
would be a good instrument in that.
Just one question, sort of leading question for Mr. Limon. Would it work for the city to actually, when people opt in to be notified, members of the public, that they could just select one of the two means rather than the city having to do email and paper mail?
I've already had, that's a good point. I've already had a conversation with the city attorney about that, and I think we'd like to slowly transition because not everyone has an email, so we can't just automatically revert to it. But as an option, we are offering it. We're doing both as a false, a fail-safe system. That eventually, I believe, we are leading towards having that, not a paper sort of agenda. Snail mail, it just takes too long sometimes for people to be alert. And folks that have responded well on the email, they get it quick, they know they can plan ahead, and rather than wait for a late agenda.
Great.
So, next slide. So what we wanted to point out is some of the problems that we've experienced. I mentioned about how the public may be unaware that they need to opt in to receive these subsequent project hearings. We often get letters, and the letters sometimes bring up an issue, but they don't specify whether they want to be continued to be an interested party. I think by default we are adding them as an interested party, right, Amber? So even though sometimes they don't ask, we put them on anyways. And we can also add them to the parcel, which gets them notice for any subsequent application that's filed, not just the application before us. And some folks, when we do that, are also surprised that we're notifying them in the future on projects. So we do want to try to maintain an integrity to our interested party list. And then what I wanted to say also is that there are some times where the interested party is not added. For some reason, there's human error involved. In this particular recent example, there might have been some examples of letters that were not input in a timely manner. So you don't get that quickness, immediacy of adding them to the interested party list. We're still looking at that specific case. We'll have a specific answer to council when we respond to that appeal issue. But again, confirming that you're on interested party, you can call up and say, "Am I interested party on this property?" So I can get these agendas. And then posting of signs, we do get complaints about, again, the signs not being legible. They get faded in the sun. Some folks actually take it down. Some people put it behind a hedge. That's not the intent behind noticing it. We're trying to put it out to the public so they know what's going on.
Can't sign the affidavit.
Right. Well, they put it on, but it's supposed to be in visible locations.
Yeah.
Sometimes we require multiple signs when they have different frontages or it's a large piece of property. So we have different paths that people can see that there are proposals. So we're aware of the issues, and I hope that explains sort of an overview of the types of things that we do. And then we also have the last slide here, where we have looked at our agendas, and maybe there is an opportunity to have more information about interested parties on the agendas themselves. We have a lot of information about these notices about what you should come and offer public comment period on, but it doesn't really focus in on how to become an interested party. So I think we're going to be looking at agendas. Joanna's going to be helping me update these agendas. And then we can improve our internal checks to ensure that all agendas are sent out as promised. Again, this idea of timeliness. How quickly, once we receive a letter, does it get input by staff? But you realize we have essentially 3 boards meeting every week, some meeting twice a week, getting a lot of correspondence. It's just a major effort getting copies and emails sent to board members and to applicants. Sometimes they want copies of because they want to be able to respond. So we're doing a lot of paper email pushing, and sometimes not everybody gets the email or the notice in the timely manner that they think we should be able to perform under.
Okay.
Any questions?
Yeah, any questions or discussion? I do have one public speaker slip, but I'm going to defer to the commission if they have any questions. Usually we don't have public comment during discussion
I'd like to make
items.
one comment.
Yes, Commissioner Rios.
We want to bring people in to talk and things like this, but if we have a lot of people, then we find that 2 minutes is limited, and that frustrates the public also. So somehow there has to be a balance achieved, because 2 minutes goes by very fast.
Yes, I think it's to the discretion of the chair and the individual board as to whether or not you can extend those time frames. I think it depends on the number of persons and how much time's been allocated for the agenda.
Exactly.
We have time-specific agendas, so that also makes it a challenge when...
It doesn't serve the next applicant if we're 45 minutes behind because
Right.
we heard 5 minutes from each public
Right.
member.
Therefore, when we have very complex issues in front of
more
us,
time.
then the scheduling should be accommodating that.
Well, we try
I know you
to
try.
predict the amount of controversy or interest that sometimes we're surprised when there's 20 individuals that show up on an item that we didn't anticipate. So and we've had some questions about whether or not it would be best to have folks come up here and say, I agree with the previous person.
That very rarely works.
Yeah, they want to have their 2 cents in and give their own take on it. Some want to read their letters again after we've distributed them. There again, it takes a long time to read letters into the record.
Well, if somebody has distributed a letter and taken the time to come down here, I will defer to their their comment rather than read their letter. That's why I wait to the end to
Yeah.
read the letters, because if they've already come forward,
Yeah.
no sense.
And then also
letter.
City Council has a policy where you can give up your time to other persons. And this board has gone back and forth on whether they would allow that, because someone could dominate the public comment by saying, I've got 5 neighbors that...
Okay. Real quickly, I'm going to open public comment. I have one speaker slip from Mr. DeForest. Mr. DeForest.
Thank you. I'm just wondering about interested party list, especially when it comes to historic or potential historic structures. At the Pearl Chase Society, I have at least a monthly meeting of the Preservation Committee, and they're concerned about what's going on with historic structures like the one at 1721 Santa Barbara Street. And it's not clear how one gets on the interested party list. I mean, can anyone be an interested party?
Okay, I'll close public comment and bring it to Mr. Lamont. Mr. Lamont, would you please answer that?
Yes, I can answer that question. If there's no organization who wants to be noticed on specific applications, we can, in fact, send those agendas towards that organization. So I don't know if the Pearl Chase Society has signed up as an interested party and all.
Well, sometimes it gets a notice, sometimes it doesn't, and
It isn't an automatic. We do try to be selective on which organization gets sent the agenda or the notice. So you can request an all, but you might receive a lot of agendas and notices. So we're trying to have city staff have judgment as to which ones you would be interested in. That we can double check, tell them to see if you're on that.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Lamont.
You, Joanne, she helped me with this.
Thank you, Ms. Kaufman. Also, next item on the agenda is item 2. This is citywide news racks. It's a proposal to update the city's news rack ordinance in order to provide more effective news rack management and maintenance. We have Mr. Awaziak. This is comments only.
I will double check.
okay, thank you, Jaime.
Oh, be careful. Whoa, that's low.
Please introduce yourself for the record and give us a brief presentation.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, committee members. John Awasiak, Principal Civil Engineer for the Public Works Department, and I'm here today to talk to you about news racks, our news rack ordinance update. We have an existing news rack ordinance, and we have a number of news racks. As a matter of fact, the majority of the news racks in the city are in need of repair and improvements, and most are non-compliant. So we see that we need to have an update to our ordinance in order to move in the direction that we would like to go, which is to take better, do more enforcement, do more management, and to have a system in place by which it could be sustainable and viable for the news rack owners. So safety is also move along here. Safety is a very big concern of us. About 2 years ago, we had a news rack in the city fall on a person, and they sustained an injury, and the city was named in the lawsuit, but the city successfully defended itself, and I'm not sure of the outcome, to be honest, but that really heightened our concern as well, to make sure that we have the need to ensure that these are going to be compliant and safe. So we have a draft ordinance, and we've been working collaboratively with the news rack owners and the stakeholders. Not all the material in a news rack they don't own all the news racks. Some just produce the materials, and so it's a collaborative effort. And we've had some successful meetings with the stakeholders, and we're moving forward. So this is a good opportunity right now to solicit comments from the Historic Landmarks Commission. And we've also made a presentation last Monday, the 2nd of February, with the Architectural Board Review to get some of their comments, initial comments. The game plan here is that we would get comments so that we can continue to work with the stakeholders and news rack owners so that we can positively move forward. It's a very, they have indicated to us that there are significant cost concerns, and so we want to try and develop a program or at least a game plan such that we could be implementing it in a collaborative way. So we're proposing a new fee. We're proposing new fees for this management, because right now our Public Works Department responds on a complaint basis primarily only. We don't have a budget currently established for proactively or effectively managing that. So we believe that it is a better idea to have a budget set aside for the management of it. And we've done some preliminary estimates as to what that would look like in cost. And so we translated that into preliminary fees. And we're working with the news rack owners and stakeholders. Some of them are here today, and they appear receptive to the direction that we are going. So if we can continue to move forward, that would be very good progress, such that we could continue to make progress. So with that, we've taken an inventory of the news racks in the city. Similar, you've seen a presentation by the trash receptacles, and we used the same technology and took inventory. And so we've documented all the locations. We've documented the condition of them. We've taken photographs of all the news racks in the city. There's approximately 770 boxes in the city. That's quite a number. Surprised me too.
How many trash cans were there?
I don't know. I don't know.
There should be a one-for-one relationship.
Yeah, pretty much.
So you can see that with this software, it's Google-like software, and so we have a good record of what was, and that was done in April of last year, and since then we've been working on drafting, improvements to the ordinance and working with the stakeholders. So here is a map of the locations of those news racks within the El Pueblo Viejo. It's just shaded in the pinkish color. So we've got 131 locations of privately owned news racks, 14 what we call city cabinet. Those are the green ones on State Street primarily, and down by the waterfront at the Dolphin Fountain area. And so there are 14 locations of city-owned news racks, and 4 of them are those masonry cabinets. We'll show you a photo of that too. So we put tags on each one of them so that we can identify them, and so that is part of what we would like to do, is have them all registered. So we are planning to have offer to have them registered for free this spring, as soon as we can move forward towards the ordinance committee, and offer that so that we can get a commitment by the news rack owners and stakeholders so that they could plan to have them registered, and then a fee collected accordingly. So 2 primarily differences between the news racks. They've got the private news racks, and these are the ones, examples of them here. We've got standalones, and we've got ones that are on what I call pedestals. You see that there are 4 units on the right that are on 2 legs. I call that stand the pedestal. So that's an issue for us, is that there is no official owner of those pedestals, and that's part of the problem, is that they need maintenance too. And so our game plan would be that if the news rack owners would like to take ownership of the pedestals, we'll allow the pedestals to remain as long as they're going to be maintained. Now, if no one is going to claim ownership or want to maintain them, then what Public Works would like to recommend is that Public Works will remove them. That we'll simply have them removed, and then we would ensure that whatever goes back in its place would be owned and maintained and registered. So the city doesn't have ownership of these pedestals, nor do we desire to maintain them, because it's a cost, and we feel that it is for this primary purpose, which is private news racks. So that's an issue there that we need to work through with the stakeholders. Now, these are the city-owned and maintained news racks. So we have on the left the cabinets that are the green that you're familiar with, that is on State Street. And then there's about 4 locations, I believe, in the city and the downtown area where they're not in metal cabinets, but they're in these other cabinets that are masonry and the like. So they're, again, limited, but there are a few out there, so certainly like to hear any comments on those. Again, with the pedestals, you'll see on the bottom right that one of the issues or problems is that if someone pulls their news rack, then we've got empty spaces. And if that is on the end of the pedestal, we've got a concern that people will bump into them and the like. So we need to have the ordinance updated as well to reflect what would occur when this situation, let's say a news rack owner wants to maintain the pedestal, well, then there's going to be an obligation there to fill the void.
Who put the pedestals in the first place?
My understanding is that some were installed by the Los Angeles Times.
Okay, so it was never, ever the city.
It wasn't the city. We have no record of the city doing it, and we don't believe the city did it. So
the only ones the city has installed are the ones that are in EPV on State Street.
The 2 examples I showed you, yes. And so the news racks come in various styles and colors. Now, the existing ordinance says wood grain brown is what they're supposed to be, but we all know that there's a lot of other colors out there, and then we may be graduating towards the Malaga green, more commonly known. And so we'll definitely want to get some idea of color with regards to what colors should they be. And then we've got styles. You've got them sitting on pedestals. You've got them multiple versions of the standalones, which you see on the left photo. You see that there's a bigger stand or a leg stand and the like. So what we will be doing the next time we come, what I should have mentioned is that when we do have the next follow-up meeting with the stakeholders, I'd like to come back to the ABR and the HLC and then work with you as to what we as a team, being the stakeholders and staff, would recommend as styles that we would consider. So similar to what the trash receptacles, they brought just some different styles to look at. We'd like to recommend some styles that we look at. Now, one of the key elements here is that we certainly want not to drive people out of business. That's not one of the goals here, is to actually just improve. So we'd like them painted, we'd like them repaired, we'd like make them meet safe. But we also want to plan for the replacement. So that's one of the purposes of bringing you styles to look at. So if a news rack a new one was to be placed in a location, we would like to have it meet the city's expectations of what it should look like when a new one comes into the system. But what I see primarily happening here is that we would be working with them to upgrade them so that they would be painted and then meeting the ordinance, which means no stickers that go on them and just the appropriate notifications be on them, et cetera. And a lot of that is in the existing ordinance, but we certainly have opportunity to make it better with an updated ordinance. Again, more news rack styles. These are, again, privately owned. You can see on the right, there's two doors, two areas where they can be multiple publishers can use one unit. More different styles on the pedestal. And then, of course, these boxes go into our city cabinets on State Street. So the next step then is to obtain your comments and meet with the stakeholders and keep working with them collaboratively to try and find effective solutions. Then we return, I'm anticipating in March, we return back to the ABR and HLC with for color and style, and we would bring to you an array of a selection of styles that we would like to have incorporated into the ordinance so that when they do get replaced, they would be meeting a certain style and aesthetic. So then we would go to the ordinance committee and then ultimately council. My goal is to have these news racks registered this spring, and then the new fees and everything kick in July 1 in the new fiscal year. And we've based our fees, we feel they're reasonable based on what we anticipate the future management costs will reflect. And with our strong capital programs, a lot of projects in the hopper, really can't afford to spend a lot of time on this, but we feel like about 80 hours a year would be a reasonable amount, and that's what the fees are based on, just for information. So we're trying to make this a collaborative effort with the stakeholders, trying to get the key elements identified so that we can move forward in a positive manner. With that,
watch a plan for mailboxes next. All right. I will open public comment. I have 2 speaker slips. If there are any other members of the public in the audience that wish to speak to the commission, please do fill out a blue form. The first public comment I have is from Elizabeth Wright. Ms. Wright, if you please come to the table. And
good afternoon.
You have to sit down and talk into the microphone, please.
I want to show you something first. I have, sorry, hello, my name is Elizabeth Wright, and my new idea is adopt a news rack. I'm asking the business owners, Union Bank, to adopt a news rack. In other words, it's the same idea that the palm trees down in the marina, they have a little plaque that says this tree is donated by so-and-so. I would like to see those 770 news racks adopted. In other words, the Union Bank could buy 100. County's Hospital has them in front of them. They can adopt them. You could get the citizens of Santa Barbara to pay for these. You're talking about landmarks. I go to Sambo's on the beach. Sambo's is a landmark. I talked to Chad, a business owner. I'll sit down and talk to you. Okay. Anyway, this is my story. So I talked to Chad, and he has a problem with his 5 news racks. They're sitting on the curb. His patrons can't get out of their cars on the passenger side to get to his place of business. I was talking about visual. He's talking about where they're placed. So if Chad, this is my idea, if Chad buys 5 of those boxes, I'm not sure what they cost. Say they cost $1,000, and he puts his name on each box. He says, this rack is provided by kindness by Union Bank. Union Bank would would work with the stakeholders, work with the news media, work with the business owners. This is a win-win situation. Everybody wins, the stakeholders, the business people, and the city of Santa Barbara. So I just want to. So the plaque is important. It has to be a beautiful decoration. It has to be shown on the front of each news rack. It has to be done beautifully and in good taste. The business owners, the public, the city works, and everybody will profit by this idea. Think about it. Look at the citizens of Santa Barbara would take an interest in their news racks, and people there would be less vandalism, less graffiti. And I just want to add that I'm 87 years young, and I hope by the time you make decisions, I'm still alive when I see these news racks.
Did you do the graphics on the signs?
I have a friend that I live at Garden Court, and this night person, he did the graphics.
Nice graphics.
Yeah.
I'll let you hold on to those. All right. Thank you, Mrs. Wright. Miss Wright. Next, I have Mr. DeForest.
I'm going to have to ask questions. I know that you don't like questions, but I just want to know, since these are street furniture and clutter the sidewalks, who decides where they're located? And I gather there is no decision now on what they look like or what color they are.
Mr. Chair, if I could respond to that,
Yes,
please.
please.
There is an existing ordinance in the city, and it does depict where the news racks are to be located. So there are dimensions for lines of sight.
So, Mr. DeForest, it is governed by
It
the
is
city
governed,
now.
yes.
So.
Oh, okay.
And the color, again, is, as I mentioned,
We'll have that discussion. All right. Speaking of close public comment and bring it back to the commission for discussion. Anybody have any questions for Mr. Wozniak? Commissioner Arias, I saw you.
I have no question. I have a consent suggestion.
Okay. Commissioner Murray, any questions?
Yes. So how many stakeholders are there?
Stakeholders, there's about 15 is my guess of stakeholders, mixture of the owners and the publishers, the vendors who costs get passed on to them for delivery and distribution.
Okay.
So those locations are already set in the ordinance. In other words, no increase, no decrease that's what it is.
Where the news rack exists now, we will be evaluating whether some may not meet the current ordinance or the proposed ordinance, so we'll have to have those addressed. But the vast majority of them do. And so we envision some of those being removed as a result of the fees. We've been talking with the stakeholders, and there may be a reduction because some of them may not want to pay the fee. So, and they have other alternatives. They don't have to be in the public right of way or public space. They could be on private space. So there'll be some shuffling and moving going along. That's why it's of interest to me to have the registration happen this spring. So then come July 1, if fees get approved by the ordinance committee and the council, that we would be moving in the right direction.
Okay.
Would there be some thought to just what Ms. Wright said? Well, there's some areas are just a bank of them that you can, especially in Cabrillo, where it's a historic boulevard, and you cannot even pull over to the sidewalk because there's this bank of stuff that are there. Will there be some thought to how they're spread out in such a way that they're not this obtrusive furniture that can have an impact?
I'm sure Public Works has dimension drawings or dimension detail standards that they require the box. But Mr. Wozniak, I'm sorry.
Yeah,
that's correct. That's correct. You're good. You're good.
So they do have certain constraints where the boxes can be placed so that we don't get into a condition like at City Hall. Even though that's red, nobody could pull along that curb and open a door and get out.
Yeah, that's what I mean.
Correct.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Commissioner Winnick?
Yeah, no, I do have questions. So what I'm curious is, when was the ordinance last updated? How long ago? Just roughly. I mean,
I'd venture to guess it was the 80s.
Okay, so the reason why I'm asking that is a lot's happened with technology. So I heard you say that because of the registration fees, that some of the boxes might get removed. But I'm wondering that as part of this ordinance review, would it not make sense to look at how many are really being well utilized and whether or not there needs to be so many, because they were populated at a time when there was way more subscriptions and publications than there are now in terms of paper. So.
And that's an issue we'll work with the stakeholders on, because many of them claim there is the need for them to be there, and they have the First Amendment right to be there. And if they're paying a fee and buying into so far we've got buy-in in where we're going, so we'd like to keep this train rolling such that we have a mutual benefiting result.
Yeah, just to follow up, I wasn't proposing that we would stop it entirely. It's just whether or not the proportion was right. And then my second question is, you're basically informing us that you're going to come back and ask us for some aesthetic input, basically, and keeping in mind that we don't want them to be really exorbitantly expensive. But is there any leaning that you have right now, that, as you guys have been studying this, are you looking, for instance, at the examples that the city does own on State Street as a way of informing the way they might look in the future? Is that being looked at? What basically is your precedent that you're looking at?
What's your presentation?
Well, the game plan, as I tried to explain, is that we're trying to retain status quo for cost issues. Because that would be, first let's manage what we've got. Now we could tighten the reins on new applications. So, but the new applications really generally we're believing should be following the current, because if we're allowing them in certain areas under certain conditions, we should continue to do that. So that may be some of the input that you may want to consider of providing. Is we could certainly get you a copy of the existing and proposed ordinance if that's of interest to you. That might help your decision making as to what those regulations are. I wasn't prepared to get into detail on that.
Without making a comment, but just following from, I'm going to make a comment. Following from Mr. Winnick's is that we need to see something to review. So we need a preferred style of rack. Okay. Commissioner Mahan.
Yeah, why are some of them on the inside of the sidewalk and others on the curb? Who made that decision?
That's a good question that I don't know who I can blame for that. But certainly, in the instance of where there's a hedge and the racks can back onto a hedge, that seems to be a preferred location for that. And then curbside, again, if it's in the red curb, that may be a good application. But I believe it's it's two things. One is that how can it follow the recommended dimensions that we are preferring, and then where is the best location on a site-by-site basis?
Yeah. Are we going to comment?
Sure, we'll start with you.
Yeah, well, I think it'd be very important for the commission and the board, architectural board, to weigh in on locations. For instance, in front of City Hall, maybe that's not the best place out at the curb there. I like them up against the hedges better. I think if they move onto private property, it should be pointed out that it's still in our purview to review them. Whether they're on city property or on private property, we're going to review them if it's in El Pueblo Viejo. So I think uniformity of design is really important, and color, I think we want to have a standardized color, and I think we'll be very interested in what you bring back to us.
Okay. In the interest of time, does anybody feel compelled to add to Commissioner Mahan's comments? Commissioner Rios.
Yes. I would suggest that you consider a joint meeting of the landmarks with the ABR so that we have a consistent program, because I would like to see what is approved in El Pueblo Viejo be throughout the entire city. And I assume that other cities are doing this also?
Yes.
Thank you. But I would urge you to consider a joint meeting in the most efficient way to get results.
Thank you.
Good comments, Commissioner Rios. I'll just add one comment. I think that Ms. Wright brings up an interesting concept of having sponsored news racks. I'd also like to see any news racks that are being proposed limit the amount of advertising opportunities on them. Some boxes have a big undercarriage where there gets to be a lot of advertising. I realize that they're holding their stock of papers there, but I think the key is to limit the amount of visual clutter, advertising, so on and so forth. Any other comments? Okay, that's your direction.
Thank you.
You're welcome. All right, next item on the agenda then is item 3. We are 2 minutes behind.
That's not
It's
bad.
final review. It's a historic structures report addendum. 2 things for 1130 State Street. Ms. Hernandez, why don't we start with the HSSR addendum?
Okay, I will. You may want to listen to my comments and then table it after you hear the design, like we've done on some other projects.
Okay.
But sure, we did carefully review the revised addendum based on the revised design that, in response to all the comments that the HLC has happened. So that's what you're seeing in front of you today. And I do agree with the conclusions of the report. It meets the secret guidelines and the Secretary of Interior standards for the treatment of historic properties. The implementation of the proposed project would have a less than significant impact, and staff recommends the HLC accept the report. I do believe the preparers of the report were going to address a few issues that I had some outstanding concerns on. And did you want to come up and address them?
I guess I said yes too soon.
Well, I think we're going to table the approval of the HSSR, but we want to hear the full breadth of the HSSR.
And then they'll
we'll
table
go
it
to
based
the
on design.
architecture. So I'm sorry I told you to sit down, but can I?
It was actually my fault, I think.
No, can I ask you to get up so that Mr. Hazeltine may speak out of microphone?
Oh, I was going to have him sit here.
You don't want to get up?
Trish is
No, you guys
definitely.
can stay. Oh, brother. Okay.
Sorry, I said yes too, so
Yeah.
I set the stage.
Tim Hazeltine, Post Hazeltine Associates.
Pamela Post, Post Hazeltine Associates.
There were one issue that was brought up by staff that we weren't able to address because we didn't have the information is the replication of the cornice on the McCormick wing. And the material that's actually...
What page?
Pardon?
Do you
What
have-
page of the
you guys have
report?
Oh,
Page, please.
you know, honestly, I'll have to
Oh,
look.
gosh, I don't have my glasses.
Yeah.
25 or 26?
Yeah, things got moved around last week.
We got the replacement of the roof at the bottom of the page.
Here, I think it might be under 5.3.6.
It is, yeah.
Yeah, which is page 25, 26. And so it was reviewed in the actual Phase 1-2 HSSR and the revised Phase 1-2 HSSR. And staff wanted to know what the existing material of the cornice is and what, if the replacement would have the same material or not. And at this point, they don't know what the cornice is made of. I mean, obviously it's made of construction material, but what type is unknown. So what the direction in the HSSR was that it would be recreated, and the intent of that is, if possible, to use the underlying construction material, but that in any case, if the cornice was built up of another material, that the exterior appearance, finish, and the finished material on the exterior and the profiles and dimensions would match the exterior. And we're going to actually add a line to the final PDF of this that goes in that just states that in more detail than it does now. And I forgot my list. There's also was an issue about the bus stop. And in the report, were I should call them the improvements in the public right-of-way. And what we evaluated was the relocation of the existing bus stop and the proposed signal. And that's what's in our report. That's the information that exists at this time. There isn't a design for a bus shelter, and that is not in the report because that's not part of the project at the time that we wrote this letter.
So how can you have an analysis if we don't have that?
Well, our issue is that our understanding at the time was that there was not going to be, that it was going to be a bench, was what we understood. The other is that, you know, we see the improvements in the public right-of-way as kind of affecting the overall setting, but it's not a substantial direct impact, and once that could come several years from now or sometime in the future, and it would be our understanding that at that point, staff would require or would direct what sort of review by a historian was required.
Did you want to weigh in, Ms. Allen?
I'm just here if there's a question about the public improvements and the project conditions as they relate to those.
Okay. I think what might help Commissioner Murray is the bus stop in this project at this point?
Yes.
Relocation.
A relocation of the existing, we're moving the benches and the sign and the trash receptacle that's next to that.
How about new traffic improvements? Are those in?
And there are new traffic improvements, and those are we actually.
But I think Ms. Murray's point is that they're not analyzed here.
Yes, they are.
Well, yeah, well, that's the problem because what I was having trouble with is it says in the summary in St. Louis says this meet the Secretary of Interior standard and less significant, but I don't see that actual, how is that going to be not an impact? You know what I mean? It's almost like it's just a drawing, and maybe you'll go over that. It just the sketches of drawing. There's not even a elevation where you could say, okay, well, this is going to sit here, and over there is the elevation of the library. In other words, it's not developed where you could just say, yes, there is no impact. You see what I'm saying? It's almost like, anyway, that I get we're getting onto comments, but I just wanted to ask that
Mr. Chair?
Hold on. I actually have does this pertains to Ms. Berry's question? Okay, Mr. Aguilar.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. At the Planning Commission hearing where the project was approved in November of last year, the Planning Commission conveyed two recommendations to the Historic Landmarks Commission, one related to the electrical transformer, which you've already approved, under a different permit. But this one, there was one comment which read, some commissioners would like to see more creativity in design of the bus stop and amenities that may include more public art, and not solely a mosaic design, as well as design integration to the Paseo. So they wanted to convey that to the HLC. I have it printed here for you to review, and I have the minutes from that hearing. So they're anticipating that maybe you would be looking at the design of the bus stop in this location in maybe a special way or not. It was at your discretion.
Okay. I don't think that answered Commissioner Murray's question.
That's okay. Let's move on.
No, Commissioner Rios.
I received a communication from Derek Bailey, who's the supervising transportation engineer for the city of Santa Barbara, regarding the mid-block crossing on Anapamu Street near the Art Museum. There is currently a traffic signal controlling that crosswalk and will remain a signal after the museum project, i.e. no plans to use flashers. So that signal is going to stay. It's not going to change, according to this man. I don't know whether you were aware of it or not, but I've heard signal being moved and things like this.
Well,
yes.
I can respond if you like, but I don't know if that's appropriate.
No, go ahead and respond, because that is precisely the
this
problem.
Is the word from the traffic department. So.
I'm not aware of the email that Mr. Bailey sent to you.
Well, I sent him regarding the flashing lights on Cabrillo Boulevard, and then I asked him about the mid-block crossing, and that's what he said. You can have the copy if you would like of the
Thank you.
email.
So our traffic engineer has been working with the city traffic engineer to develop our public improvement plan. Part of that public improvement plan was to create a shared loading area, which we can show you on plans and that are attached to your letter report. I'm not sure exactly the sheet reference, but they're in there. And we have a shared bus stop and loading area. The MTD bus, the benches, and I have a tiny picture here. The intent is to relocate those in the area noted on our site plan. Mm-hmm. You're correct, they are not elevated in the drawings. Mm-hmm. But this is what I believe Ms. Post and Mr. Hazeltine analyzed in their report, that we were simply relocating this bus stop furniture down the street, and that is what they analyzed. In terms of Mr. Bailey, we want to work with that existing traffic signal in order to maintain safety in line of sight when there is a bus stopped at the new bus stop location, the curb needs to be extended out into the vehicular travelway, out into Anapamu Street. So the post will relocate, and so when cars are traveling and someone hits the button across the street, they can see the signal. That's why, and so that is the extent of the public improvements in that location. And now, I'm sorry, one more item on that. We were tasked also by the Planning Commission to exhaust all opportunities to not have to do a mast arm in that location. The only reason we were looking at a mast arm was, again, to maintain line of sight to that pedestrian-operated signal. So we have worked out a public improvement plan that shows a curb extension and the relocation of the existing traffic signal. And I'd be happy to read his email, but I wanted to kind of explain
you're welcome to have
what
the
we've
copy.
been working on.
So I'm sorry.
And he may have, I don't know if he, I'll just read it and let you know if I think it's capturing everything.
Just, I just...
That's the detailed answer.
Thank you.
And if it's the pleasure of the chair, I would like to respond to Fermina's, Commissioner Murray's comment. Our analysis of the relocation of the bus stop, thank you, is in section 5.3.9 of the report. So I know usually you would have an elevation, but we believed, in the sense of the bus benches, that because the benches are existing, they're not proposing a new design, and they're the standard bench in this area, that it wasn't necessary to actually include an elevation. I mean, we thought that they were being...
I didn't finish and then...
that if they were proposing a new design or a canopy over it, we believe that we would have wanted that and asked for it. And in fact, it's always good to have elevations, but because they're relocating what exists, they're not adding to it or changing it in its design, that we thought there's no more impact of having the two metal benches that exist relocated. They're not going to impair the view. I mean, I guess we could, of course, we can always amend this to say that specifically say that the relocated benches will not impair the view of this any more than they do now. They'll just be in a slightly different location.
My concern was, right now, if you look at that picture, the bench is over there, and so when the bus comes, it stops there. It's not obstructing the plaza of the library, you see? And so now it's going to change. It's going to move up to here. And how is that bus and the bulb outs and all that going to impact the historic sense of the library? And now that you're doing the plaza, I'm just raising these kind of issues, and you are evaluating something without other components. And so, I just...
I'm sorry, may I respond?
Yeah, sure.
The issue is that the existing library plaza, with the exception of, I understand, of the landmarked eucalyptus trees, is not considered a significant historic landscape. So our evaluation is focused on how the project would affect significant historic resources as identified by the city. And so I understand your comment about where that's relocated may have aesthetic impacts on Library Plaza, but there's not a nexus to put it in our report, because we would be doing a lot more on our reports if we were addressing aesthetic issues that are not affecting an identified historic resource.
Right. No, that makes sense.
Chair Studi?
Yeah, makes sense.
Understand that?
I had one comment on
Mr.
related.
Hernandez?
I had the same concern when I read the draft as Commissioner Murray about what exactly the bus stop's going to look like and the impact, not so much for me the plaza, but to that Myron Hunt Faulkner Gallery, because we're clearing the way in the new plaza plan to be able to view that and make it more of a focal point. And I reviewed it and I made sure it's not in front of the Faulkner Gallery. It's going to be
right here.
Yeah, it's going to be over towards the trees.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Beg your pardon.
So the location's better, and I too asked if it was going to be benches, a shelter, or a sign, and asked for that evaluation. So I think it would be nice if they added that one part to the as a condition of
yeah,
approval.
well, that's why I was talking. Usually, when you have this kind of stuff, you have an elevation in the back, and immediately you see that, and you say, "Okay, fine, you're done." You know.
Especially, we don't want it to be in the way of the recreated.
Yeah, right. They're gonna
landscape that's happening.
Okay. Any other questions from the commission?
On the report?
On the report.
Question?
Yes.
On page 16, you state building materials to the maximum extent feasible. I'd like a definition of what that means.
Maximum extent feasible is...
Who decides?
Well, it's contingent on what is being done. If in some cases there needs to be, some historic material is removed, the intent is that as much as possible is kept, and that's usually accomplished through review by, an urban historian, city staff, or a private consultant.
And I would strongly urge that that kind of statement be placed in that paragraph, because right now, maximum extent feasible is just floating out there, and nobody knows who's going to decide or what and all that. So there needs to be some anchor to that statement, or the statement changed. Nicole, do you have some input on that?
I do. I think I agree that it could be a stronger word saying it will match the materials and be reviewed by the historians of record. If it doesn't, and then it will come back to staff and the commission for the final.
Or just staff, I think.
Yeah.
No,
but I think being solid with it needs to match materials, and if not, what's going to happen specifically is a good point to be made clear.
Okay. All right. Any other questions, comments? Anybody on the report?
Mr. Chair, I have one. I'm sorry, Trish, you wanted to go ahead?
No, she doesn't have the floor. You do.
Can I take it home with me? Wrap it up?
You really want? They are carpet tile.
I'd like to tell you that it is a very good report, and I read it very carefully. And one of the things that I am particularly happy for is that the items that are referred back to the city qualified historian comes back to the landmarks for the final decision. I think the buck really does stop with us, and it should. And I'm glad that that's in there, and I thank you for that. And I just looked for words that are too vague, and if those can be eliminated to be specific, it's much better. Then everybody knows what the rules are. Thank you.
Okay. All right. Is it the pleasure of I have a public comment slip. I'll open public comment, and one slip, and that's for Mr. DeForest. Were you prepared to comment on the HSSR?
Yes.
Okay.
What
please,
is omitted, or what may not be realized, is that when my father, Lockwood DeForest, designed his entrance and walls around the museum and that seating area was designed because that was to be the bus stop. Mm-hmm. So there is where the buses back in the 50s stopped, and then this idea of pushing the bus stop further down Anapamu Street seemed to have evolved. So I don't think, historically, to keep the facade of the museum and the facade of the Faulkner Gallery as uncluttered as possible, they're probably the necessity of a bus stop at that location should be explored. Thank you.
I think the answer to that is probably that buses can't stop in the intersection to pick up the passengers. And that bus, that circular bus.
Well, they were just down Anapamu Street a little bit.
Okay.
And then they also stopped on State Street at that corner.
Oh, for the buses on State. Okay. All right. What's the pleasure of the commission? To table the approval of the historic structures report until after we hear the presentation, or do you want to give an approval? I suggest that we table it.
Then fine.
Okay, then let's go ahead with the project proposal presentation. And I will read them from the last meeting, which was January 14th, 2015. It was continued 2 weeks with comments. The comments were that the expression of the windows should be deeply recessed. The art receiving facility tower door should be more recessed. Should be recessed as much as possible. Provide appropriate shadowing on the cornice. Further study the large glass entrance on the east elevation. Solid panels along the bottom of the doors and side windows are suggested. Study the door hardware. Study the metal roof material. Study lighting fixtures, particularly those that are on the terrace. Exhaust all design opportunities prior to implementing a mast arm traffic signal design on Anapamu Street. The action was, as I said, 2-week continuance, and Mahan made the motion. Winnick seconded it. It was a 6-1-1 vote. Lavoie opposed. Does not find the design yet approvable. And Vena abstained. Schallenberger was absent. The motion carried. Please introduce yourselves for the record and give us a quick, brief presentation.
Trish Allen with Suzanne Suzanne Elledge Planning and Permitting.
Yeah, like Linda.com.
I'm Bob Kupiak from Kupiak Architects, architect for the museum.
I'm Jamie Palencia. I'm with Kupiak Architects.
We distributed this. Just thank you for Commissioner Suding for reiterating the comments. Last time we actually included them so that we could kind of go through exactly what address some of the issues that were brought up at the last hearing. Item 1. If we could refer to your new detail sheet, 2-4, we have revised our details and regressed the windows deeper into their window openings. They're now set back an additional. They're 8 inches. There's an 8-inch stucco return in order to give the shadowing effect that we're looking for. I think on item 2, the ARF tower door should be recessed as much as possible. In the existing set, that was actually shown. This is on sheets A 2.6 and 2.7.
Sorry, this is only relevant for that window recess. There we go.
This door has now been set back, so there's about a 12-inch stucco return that's a little bit deeper than it was before. I think the actual details on 2.7, as you can see on this jam section in the upper right-hand corner, we've now kind of pulled that door back deeper into the wall so that we have that shadow. Sorry, I'm a little getting far from the mic.
Go ahead and turn that microphone on because it does triangulate.
I can kind of swing back and forth. You want to bring out the rendering of the cornice?
Shadowing on the cornice.
So the cornice profile as shown in. Let's get rid of this one for a minute. Renderings in here. As shown in detail A4 on that sheet is actually a replica of the cornice that's on the front of the building. We've kind of revised our rendering slightly. It is in this set. So this has been both the vent from up above and the door have been regressed deeper into that wall, so there's a good 1-foot shadow line of stucco return. On item number 4, further study the large glass entrance. Let's bring out that new. If we go to sheet This is A2.4 in the new details. Yeah, I just want the rendered image as well. Yeah. So we've studied a panelization of the side lights. There's about a 19-inch, if I'm doing that right. If we can, I can pass a couple of copies of this around.
City TV could zoom in a bit. Don't get your hand off it.
There you go. Am I here, Jamie? Right. Yes. Right. There's a 1'7" panelized effect in the two side lights that are there, and as requested in terms of studying hardware for this door, we're actually proposing that this vertical, it's actually a custom-made handrail that is partly bronze and partly stainless steel, so that your hand grip is on the stainless part of the grip, and it is mounting to the door as shown on the upper right-hand corner of that sheet in details A7, A9, and A8. As appropriately commented on by Commissioner Winnick, the last placeholder was just a placeholder.
Stay awake.
In the study of the roof material, we have a sample board that we're bringing today to talk about the different materials of the project.
Either way.
Yeah, that one actually. This is a testament to the fact that glue and stone are not, glue guns and stone are not the appropriate tool. We have reviewed the different types of metal panel ceilings that are available. This is a shaped metal panel that actually, as you can see it in terms of the number of courses, that's actually the photographic image of a full panel. This is the color and finish that panel would be applied in. And in a lightweight format, this would at least replicate the look of a clay tile roof on the building. And obviously we have lots of clay tile that are adjacent to it. So that is the proposed roofing material for the rooftop pavilion. I mean, some of the other materials that are shown on this panel, obviously we will be any of the low retaining walls that will match the Lockwood to Forest landscape will be replicated in the same concrete mix. I think people have extracted that mix from Ozzie DeRosa for a long time, and I believe that there is not a problem in terms of replicating it. Just to stay in, we've taken a photographic image of what the stucco finish is that'll be replicated on the building, and we will be painting that stucco with the exact same paint that the museum is painted in now. So those colors won't change. In terms of metal work on the building, including the new entrance doors, this is the metallized anodic finish that we propose to use in a kind of medium value bronze. If we could refer back to that rendering just for one moment, we are proposing that the threshold around that entrance be framed in stone, and we're proposing to use a limestone material, a filled limestone, to give it some sense of richness and color to help embellish that entrance. Just to finish what we're looking at on this board, actually on the rooftop terrace in relationship to all these other roof materials, the other two materials that are shown here are the paving material, which is a 2-inch bluestone paver that'll be done in a similar pattern as shown in this photograph. And other than the stucco material and the roof material, we do have some painted door surfaces that we are proposing this seafoam green paint color to be part of that palette of colors on the roof. I think the other issue, we have been in consult with our lighting designers, Horton Lees Brogdon, in terms of something that has been different. This has been kind of reviewed by our historians, but we are proposing that the light fixtures that be used as both the sconces and as the removable pole lights that we proposed in our last presentation be this sconce.
Are they showing the pole lights? There we go.
And it has a matching pole light. And the pole light actually, will be demountable. That pole light will be used only when it's an evening occasion where we are not, worried about the number of people. I mean, it's really a light fixture so that people can see each other.
Is there a pole option number 2?
No, there is not.
Anybody want to see these?
There is a key set of drawings within this set that reference all the materials that are on this board back to the elevations to show where they are actually being applied.
Lastly, item 8.
Mr. Chair, as part of the letter report conversation, I went over what we're doing with the public improvements, and the comment was exhaust all design opportunities prior to implementing a mast arm traffic signal design on Anapamu Street. So we are not doing the mast arm as directed by the Planning Commission and also with concurrence from the Landmarks Commission.
You're just putting a short arm on there that sticks out.
Yeah, what do you call that?
He's going to stand down there and wave.
So there is a sheet buried in this set that shows the public improvement plan with the curb extension and relocation of the existing traffic signal. No mast arm.
Okay, you want to show that to us?
Than what we saw in the report?
It's the same sheet that you looked at in the report, and Bob would have to move all this stuff off and get to that sheet, which we could do.
This one
We
here.
have that one.
What page?
It's towards the back.
This can move away.
And while we're looking for that, just to add on, we do have Bob Cunningham here from Arcadia. We presented a preliminary landscape plan to the commission at our hearing in December, and that was approved. And we have further developed those landscape drawings into a final set, so includes the necessary components with the species and sizes
Cunningham, please,
and the
approach the
irrigation.
table.
And then here's this sheet. I was just stalling.
Yeah. I knew it.
Keep things moving along. That's what I was doing.
So it's pretty much what we've just seen.
Very different than
but
stalling.
Larger scale, I guess.
Sorry, Bob. So basically, I never sit in the middle seat. Here's the existing traffic signal, and it's being proposed to be relocated out here. And we're still finalizing engineering drawings, so this is not yet developed into a construction drawing. So the reason for this is so that when traffic is coming westbound.
From State Street.
From State Street, down Anapamu Street, that there is line of sight to see when that signal turns red and someone's crossing the street. That is the purpose of this public improvement. And here it is. Here's an outline of that traffic signal. Last time we were here, we were showing both options, and the mast arm was in there, but we've erased that.
Okay. Does that conclude your presentation?
Well,
Sorry about being grabby.
Okay.
We have final landscape plans. I don't know if the commission wants to look at
No, I
those.
do want to see that, but that concludes this portion of the
Item,
presentation.
yeah.
All right, Mr. Cunningham.
And members of the commission.
Are they in the set?
Somewhere in here, presumably there is a landscape plan.
Drawings towards the end.
See, you had to pull all this stuff away anyway to get to the landscape drawings.
Oh, okay. I was just trying to get to the
This basically shows you that we're irrigating the new landscape.
Okay.
Irrigation plan.
Nice job.
Yeah, thank you. It's very neat, right?
Would be nice.
Could you call out
This is a
page
community
number
priority
so that we
project.
can-
Sure.
Maybe
L1-2.
L1-2.
Irrigation for the upper level.
Mezzanine, right?
LP-1.
Planting at the lower ground floor level, the new 60-inch.
Can you wait
Coast
until
Light.
we get to the page, please?
Of course.
LP1.
Thank you. Can we-
Step it up.
LP-1.
It's in this one, okay. LP dash.
Very good.
Toward the back.
LP.
LP-1.
We go to LD.
We have LP as in Philip.
If you're on
Dash
LD,
one,
you've
got
gone
it.
too far.
Okay. All right.
Okay.
Thank you. Sorry, Bob.
No problem, Commissioner Arias. The upper left-hand corner of the drawing that you should be looking at shows a new 60-inch box Coast Live Oak adjacent to Anapamu Street. As you round the corner, the small plants in front of the wall in the planter are that's Ruscus hypoglossum, butcher's broom. Presumably this was all shown on the preliminary plan.
Correct.
I'm sorry my partner Derek is not here to present this. It is his design. The other plants in the planter are the Dovialis caffra, the K apple, which is the same hedge that's around the Anapamu side and the State Street side, basically just trying to stay consistent with the existing landscape. 2 pairs of Italian cypress on the wall facing the library. That is essentially it. Well, no, actually, I'm sorry. In this planter between the Italian cypress, a shore juniper ground cover under Pittosporum crassifolia nana, shrub. Again, in keeping with existing. Sorry, Mr. Sudi.
Question, what's the plant material? Oh,
That's the butcher's broom.
okay, and how tall is that wall?
I'm not sure.
15 feet?
I didn't ask Derek.
7.
Seven.
With a gate. This is our service yard.
Right. Okay.
The upper floor is a combination of succulents at grade level and then Westringia, I believe. No, let's change that. Acacia cognata, cousin it. An interesting small shrub. And I think that's essentially it.
Yeah. Okay.
And you've seen the irrigation plans.
Another question for you or Mr. Kupiak. Who is designing the additional walls? I believe this is a wall here, this is a wall here, that's a wall, that's a wall. Who's designing those? Is it Mr. Cunningham or is it Mr. Kupiak?
It's Mr. Kubiak.
Okay. The material of those walls is?
Stucco on concrete.
Okay. When you were referring to matching the concrete mixture of the walls, existing walls, for new walls, which walls were you speaking about?
So if we go back and maybe look at this rendering that everyone has, I think you can kind of see a little piece of it. So similar to the rest of the building, the wall of the building or the wall of the courtyard behind is done in a plaster finish stucco. The planter bed walls that are lower in front of it that you're seeing here wrapping around it in the same shape are done in the concrete, similar to the vocabulary on Anapamu Street. This is the way we're treating extending the kind of Lockwood to Forest materiality of the scheme of the museum all the way to the corners of the building and including at the end the new park entrance.
In the concrete.
Analysis, the HSSR analysis on page 27 under 5.3.7, it says the landscape's hardscape, which I'm inferring to be the walls, would recall in form the historic landscape features, but would use stuccoed surfaces to clearly distinguish the new hardscape features from the original Lockwood to Forest Junior design. Am I correct in interpreting that to say that that hardscape is referring to the walls? Okay, so then by designing the lower walls in keeping with the concrete blended walls of the Lockwood to Forest, we're not distinguishing clearly the new hardscape from the original Lockwood to Forest. So something needs to change there.
Either the report or the one or the
I
other.
would hazard to say at this moment that it'd be the report that would change. I think that the intention of the design is to keep the vocabulary of the building consistent.
The preparer of the report has to be comfortable with changing the report. And I'm not sure that the preparer of the report is comfortable, because I don't think the preparer of the report would think that we're comfortable with that change.
It depends.
It depends. Preparer of the report.
I think we should ask. I think we should ask that question.
That's why we tabled the HSSR.
Yeah, because then it won't meet the Secretary of Interior standards.
Then it, pardon?
It won't meet the Secretary of Interior standards.
If it's what?
If it's not distinguished, like yours.
So if it is stucco.
If it's, yeah, it says.
If it's stucco, it is distinguished.
Right.
If it is not stucco, what is being proposed to us,
Right,
then it does not meet the Secretary of Interior standards.
Right, unless they plan to distinguish another
Do
way.
you understand that, Mr. Kupiak?
Well, unless they use some other way to distinguish it.
Are we into comments on this?
On landscape, and I know that we're going back and forth, and but
my recollection is that the walls, the existing walls, are bush hammered. That they're not only the exposed aggregate, but they're bush hammered in some way. The aggregate's been exposed by some kind of treatment. I don't know.
Mechanical treatment.
Bush hammering is the right word.
It is the right word.
And so these walls that come around here, like this, could be treated with a different kind of bush hammer or a different, slightly different texture.
Intensity.
And that would distinguish them from the original.
Would it?
Well, there's a question. I mean, I think it could.
Could. It
Yeah,
could.
yeah.
It could.
Mr. Chair?
Who was that?
Mr. Lavoie.
Commissioner Lavoie.
It's my recollection that the Lockwood DeForest walls have been altered already at the entrance. Were they not?
Commissioner Lavoie, that is correct. The central staircase on the State Street elevation was added in the early 90s.
And that's indistinguishable from what's on the
It's
side.
indistinguishable, and there were also some other alterations down at the east end of the Sterling Morton Gallery. When the gallery was built, they modified part of that. We're not sure exactly how much. I think the intent in the report was that there would be some. We didn't want there to be some confusion historically about what was the actual Lockwood DeForest product and what isn't. I guess the difference on the State Street elevation is they removed part of the retaining wall and the bench, but they didn't really add any, except on the sides of the central staircase to support the retaining wall.
Cheek wall.
Thank you.
So, Ms. Hernandez, where do we stand then? Were you finished, Commissioner Lavoie?
Well, would it, well, yeah, I guess, come back. Don't leave yet. Would a construction joint, which there will be a sufficient differentiation?
Well, one other would be not to bush hammer it with a joint. I mean, maybe using it would still be
a slightly
exposed.
different texture.
Textured finish would accomplish. There needs to be some differentiation, or historically someone would easily see that as all of one piece and historically related.
Yeah. Okay.
But there are other solutions. It's just that that was our understanding of what
I
was
mean, the
gonna go on
report
there.
says clearly distinguishable. So
It needs to have some.
That clarity needs to be there, but it could be the same material, just a different finish.
So
With the joint.
Could the report not just say clearly distinguishable, take out the reference to plaster, and then you would perhaps have the solution?
Yeah, because
think
you're
it needs to
recommending cluster that basically.
Sorry, Commissioner
Yeah.
Murder, I agree, and I think honestly that, and I believe the urban historian was going to agree that we'd have to insert some language, but not leave it amorphous, but be very directed about what the actual finish, the changes in appearance are that give you the distinguishing between the two.
And
Yes.
not that it's stucco, because I don't think that's the intent of the designer to use the stucco. I mean,
Well, there was, anyways, I won't go into that. But okay.
Maybe once upon a
Ms.
time.
Hernandez, would you like to weigh in?
No, I agree that they do need to be specific about how it's going to be different. So when they decide on the final material and texture, that they can alter that statement and we can review it.
Okay, I think that should come to the full commission.
Okay.
Not just.
Yeah, they can submit it as a letter.
I think we could perhaps be able to help, if you guys are comfortable with it, we could come up with a distinguishing language when we approve the report, if we're able to approve the report today, when we make a motion.
But then we haven't seen.
We haven't seen the material.
The design of the material.
Well, the report describes it. We still, as a commission, could have it reviewed on consent or whatever. Well, I'm sorry, I'm starting a whole big discourse here.
Okay. Well, we'll table that. I mean, we'll decide later on that. Okay.
Just for clarity's sake, that there is a separation between where the old wall ends and we begin.
There's a
walkway coming through.
So there would be no joint.
Right, there would be no joint, but I do think that it would be pretty easy to not bush hammer the surface of that material as much as it is, so that you would have a distinct difference between the amount of aggregate exposed in the new wall as opposed to the old wall. The old wall has very exposed aggregate. I think you could lessen that, and in fact, I think the wall would look like it was a little newer because of that. But the coloration of it could still, and texture could kind of be similar.
And then, not to tie up Mr. Cunningham too much longer, I think that the landscape plan looks fine. I would like to see some taller walls taller plants at the service wall area, or a clinging vine on that wall, that stucco wall. Anybody else have any comments on the landscape?
What wall are you talking about?
I'm talking about the service area wall, this wall here.
Oh.
The plant material there, my recollection is that which is broom, only gets to be about 3 feet at the most, if even that. So, okay, then I think, Mr. Cunningham, you're good to go.
Kicking you out.
I do want to ask the commission. No, I'm going to open public comment because I actually deviated and went into a question and a comment. But I'll open public comment. I have one speaker slip from Mr. DeForest. Mr. DeForest.
Thank you. Back to the east glass entrance. I am of the opinion that it does not conform to EPV guidelines. It isn't Spanish Revival, and certainly I don't see any Italian influence on it. To me, it looks like a 1920s bank entrance. So I hope that can be redesigned. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. DeForest. I'll now close public comment, bring it to the commission. Any questions, comments on the architecture? Commissioner Vena?
I just have a question on, I guess it's a roof tile that appears to be metal. I'm not too sure exactly where that's at.
The metal roof is on the
Can you turn your
rooftop.
microphone on, Mr. Vena?
It is on the rooftop pavilion building.
Because of the metal load.
Appropriate material?
We've looked at a number of different materials. One of the reasons that a metal roof was being proposed, we've had a a standing seam metal roof. We, at the Commission's request, actually started to look at alternative materials that would replicate some look of the Spanish clay tile. Our problem is we're fighting weight. The seismic implication on the structure of the building is something we're trying to keep this rooftop pavilion as light as possible, which is why we've kind of proposed a metal roof.
I see. Okay. Thank you.
Bouncing off that question, how do you treat the bird stops there?
It has a filler in it that ends it of metal. I mean, it's an all metal system.
Okay.
They have end caps.
Commissioner Reese, any questions, comments?
How high are the pole lights?
How tall are the pole lights?
I think we're probably about 8 feet tall.
Okay.
Units by that big, okay.
And I concur with the entranceway being changed. I agree with Mr. DeForest that it does look like a bank, and it would be nice if there could be something changed to it.
Commissioner Lavoie?
I'd echo that. But I'll start with the question. What on the existing building or in the work of David Adler or Chester Carjola inspired the limestone surround at the entry?
I think based upon some of the comments that have come from the commission in order to embellish this entrance and make it more special, we chose to use that as a stone surround in terms of giving the threshold a little bit more weight.
Okay. I find it a particularly contemporary. It even makes something that's already contemporary more contemporary. And more appropriate to Beverly Hills than Santa Barbara. The same with the whole entrance system. I think when the raised panels were requested on the side lights, it would be expected that they would be matched on the doors, which is more traditional than just a 10-inch kick plate, particularly on such a large door. And as a comment, I'm still hoping to see a unified architectural scheme to this that's appropriate to this historic resource, and I'm not seeing it yet. And the light fixtures are still not acceptable. That's all.
Commissioner Murray, questions, comments?
It said in the report that the
what page?
21. It said that the tower has been overall height has been reduced and footprint as well as simplify architectural detailing.
Where are you?
This is page 21 on the bottom paragraph.
In the paragraph starting proposed alterations and additions under that heading.
Yeah, could you talk about that? How exactly have they been reduced? And the width of the elevator tower has been reduced from 24.5 feet to approximately 17 feet by 19.
I think this transformation from the largest elevator to the smallest building that we have kind of occurred over the last 7 meetings here.
So they are now.
It has been for the last several sessions that the building has been kind of pinched to the smallest footprint that it can be.
Any comments or questions anymore?
No, go ahead.
Commissioner Winnick.
Okay, so I guess we're doing comments or questions and comments are sort of blended together. Makes it hard to do questions.
Do the best you can.
I'm sure I can get up to the task.
They're not delivering anything.
Funny enough, I have a slightly different take. I'm ready to grant this project design approval. It already has design approval, but final approval. What my question was going to be is on your sample board, when you described the stone around the entry, you called it limestone, but of course on the sample board it's called out as travertine.
It's a travertine.
But I actually liked your sentiment. So I guess my question is why travertine over limestone?
We picked that material particularly for the color and the texture of it. We wanted something that had some life to it, some vein, not veining, but some horizontal stratification. We felt like that would be a good color mix with the proposal that we're making with bronze at that door.
I see. All right. My opinion on it is I think the texture would be better, maybe look a little more that it fits in the district if it was just a limestone that has less veining and less pattern to it, but in the same color range that you're looking at would be my opinion. That was really my biggest question. The only other thing was just the fine-tuning. I appreciate that you've gone and made all the recesses much deeper on the windows as well as the receiving entrance door. The only feeling that I had there is it feels a little harsh, the crispness of the corners and everything on the art receiving door. And I don't know if you've ever looked at just doing a little taper or something there just to soften that edge. That would be...
Well, something tells me in the hand-applied stucco that'll go on there, it might be a little bit more forgiving than the computer rendering, which is painfully crisp.
That one would hope, but maybe that's something that's also indicated in your drawings. Thanks.
Did you want to weigh in on the door hardware, the lighting fixture?
Oh, the door hardware, I think...
And the tin roof, middle roof?
I find the door hardware favorable. The tin roof I can accept given it's a limited use of it, and I think it's better than standing seam. The light fixtures I think are not there yet. Those could come back on consent, I would think.
Okay, Commissioner Mahan.
Yeah, I don't know, I agree with that the comment that was made that the paneling on the sides maybe should be on the door too, and I'm not even, it might also be up on the, whatever you call that, above the door.
The transom?
The transom might be paneled. I think that it's the direction always seems to be toward minimalism, and I think that that's where you go astray with El Pueblo Viejo, which, generally speaking, things are not minimal. Going back to our favorite example of the Libero Theater and the moldings around the great door there, they're maximum rather than minimalist, and so maybe the limestone is too delicate and too thin. Maybe it should be. I mean, I like the idea of a sewn frame. I think that's a nice touch. Maybe it just doesn't have enough guts to it, and it should be more. If it's going to go toward El Pueblo Viejo, it's going to be stronger and more vibrant, and that's the thing. These door pulls. I suppose there are some handicapped requirements that you have to follow in terms of the door pulls. But stainless steel is not El Pueblo Viejo. It just isn't, and so I don't like that. I think and these light fixtures. It just seems, you can just walk around town and see the most beautiful light fixtures all over El Pueblo Viejo, and these are so. I don't know what word to use to describe.
Not El Pueblo Viejo.
They're not El Pueblo Viejo, right? And stop fighting it, and get it's I just
they're not acceptable.
They're just not acceptable. Yeah.
Mr. Vena.
I'd like to address the main entry again, or the back entry, or the main entry, if I may.
Park entry.
I'm not an architect, but I do understand proportions, and I don't see anywhere in Santa Barbara where we have any kind of a entry window or anything looking like this. And far be it, looking at the scale of the museum entries in different places, this is totally out of scale for human, as far as human scale is concerned. So unless they were delivering some massive things in here, other than an amount of light that needs to illuminate whatever's inside, I just think it's really, really out of scale, out of proportion, and just really doesn't belong here. Thank you.
Okay. Any other comments or questions?
Well, Mr. Chair, if I could speak up. I just want to do two things. One, to talk about the door hardware. I just want to throw out one idea. I know we're not supposed to be designing it, but I think the two-tone nature of the door handle is something nice. It gives it a little more texture. Maybe the other tone could be wood and be actual wood rather than stainless. I just wanted to offer that keeping that concept might be worthwhile. The second thing, I think we have to be careful about how much we are asking the applicant to change, because this project has received design approval, which did have the big proportion of this back entrance. So I think that's kind of a given, I would think, in terms of what we've done as a commission.
You're absolutely right. There's only so much that we can do with the proportion of the opening there. I do think that Commissioner Mahan brings up a valid point that perhaps a more meaty or beefier or bolder surround on that door or that opening might help. So let's take the HSSR first. Sorry to bounce back to it, but I think we need to do that before we do the project.
Okay.
Would somebody like to make a motion with the clarification? I believe it was on page 27 of the material analysis of the proposed landscape hardscape walls. And what else was there in the report?
I think our
Weasel words.
writers of the report may have the suggested language.
Okay.
I see writing.
I was looking for a
Chair
motion,
Suding,
but
may
yes,
we
go ahead.
I'll just verbalize it.
That'd be great.
This is the suggested language for the revision to the analysis of the retaining walls. It would say the material of the new retaining walls would match the concrete material of the Lockwood DeForest designed retaining walls, but would be subtly distinguished in hue and texture by not featuring the bush-hammered surface in order to distinguish the historic hardscape features from the new.
You're not going to get me, or you're not going to get an approval of that language right now.
No, I was just...
Because you're going to have to come back with the fixing the weasel words, as Commissioner Rios talks about.
But that was just to give an idea of where we're going.
I think and I think that's fine. I think the one thing that you need to distinguish in there is that we're talking about the low retaining walls.
Yes.
Correct. All of the other walls really are screen walls, so by defining it as a retaining wall, but I think it might just be helpful to say low retaining
or
wall.
low planting
Yeah,
wall.
to distinguish from the stucco.
Yes, Commissioner.
Did I
Rios.
hear correctly? You used the term suddenly?
Subtly.
Subtly.
Subtly. I thought suddenly. I got it. But
Subtly.
the way I heard it, I thought, what? You know?
I think you're on the right track with that language. Would somebody like to make a motion for the HSSR to return to the historic?
So 2 weeks continuance, I'm imagining?
Oh, that's fine.
Okay, so...
Mr. Chair?
Staff want to take care of it, or the commission want to see it? Commissioner Lavoie.
This is something that staff is quite capable of.
So return to staff 2 week.
On consent, or staff, not even consent, just to
Staff's
start.
fine.
Okay, I'll make that motion.
Second.
Got a motion
Speak to
by
the motion.
Whitnick, second by Mahan, under discussion.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
unfortunately, I'm unable to support the report because I disagree with the findings that I don't find the proposed design compatible with the original resource.
Okay.
However, excellently written, the report and its analysis.
Okay. So at the time of the vote, please.
Question.
Yes, Commissioner
In the
Rios.
motion, the rewording of that one phrase and the changing of the vague
Yes,
terms
that is
are included in
Yes.
the motion.
Yes.
Thank
And
you.
you'll include the analysis of the bus stop, moving the.
The bus
Oh,
stop.
okay, so that's also included, the analysis of the
Maker of
bus
the
stop.
motion okay with that, and the seconder okay? All right, end of discussion. Vote.
What is the motion?
The motion is to basically...
Approve it?
2 week continuance to return to the staff historian
for final
for
approval.
verification of the changes to the language in the report regarding the bus stop, regarding the
I
walls.
got the notes, yeah.
Okay. What
So
else
should we
do you
say
need to know?
approval contingent on it returning?
Then does it have to come back for an approval action by the commission, or is staff able to make an approval
good
action?
point.
That's
It's
what I'm
Good,
not understanding.
valid point.
Mr. Chair, if the maker of the motion would consider final approval with the corrections
Return to staff.
reviewed by staff.
Thank you, Commissioner
That's exactly what
Lavoie. I take that exactly.
Seconder okay?
Yes.
All right, I'm ending discussion, calling question, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? One abstention, Commissioner Lavoie, and he stated those.
No, he was opposed. Not,
Was
not
opposed.
abstained.
Did I say abstain? Okay, opposed. One commissioner opposed. He stated the reasons of his opposition. Any abstentions? None. Okay.
Thank you.
Now,
Thank you.
You're welcome. Let's go
Don't run
to
too far.
the project. Does somebody have, Pam, I suppose, would you like those?
Thank you very much.
They have a way to make a motion on this one.
Would somebody like to make a motion on the architectural portion of this project?
Consensus that it sounds like it needs to come back for 2 week continuance.
With what comments?
Wow, there wasn't a lot of consent. I think the comment would be to restudy the entrance, the detailing around the entrance for the
Okay.
stone surround, maybe the material of the stone, and the panelization of the transom and the panels at the bottom of the door, and to consider an alternative material instead of the stainless steel at the door, and to come back with alternatives for the lighting.
Lighting fixtures.
And the metal roof is acceptable.
Yeah, the lights.
Yeah, I think
Lights on.
So,
I'll make that
2
motion.
week continuance?
Can that be to the consent calendar for those details?
I don't think that the commission would be comfortable enough with having Mr. Mahan have to make that decision on this solely.
And I'm not going to be on consent next week.
We're not even sure who's here.
Mr. Chair, could we hear again the motion?
I'm going to be at my
It speaks
psychiatrist.
very softly, and
Oh,
it's
sorry.
hard to pick up on it.
You want to do it?
I'll try it again. Okay, so
All right, quiet, please.
Two-week continuance, asking the applicant to restudy the surround of the park entrance, the stone detailing, what this stone material is, whether it's a limestone or a travertine, to study the panelization of the transoms at the entrance, the panelization of the panels beneath the doors and side lights, to consider a different material instead of stainless steel on the pull, on the door pull hardware, and to restudy the lights on the roof, but that the metal that's been proposed for the little barrel tile of the roof would be acceptable.
Did you get that? Okay.
And the landscape is acceptable.
Okay.
Well, we
About
didn't
the
actually do the
lights.
motion on it, did we?
We did.
Assume that
So the landscaping is acceptable with the one clarification that the planting around that one service utility enclosure would have higher planting. And
Taller planting or vines.
Or vines.
Question.
Yes.
I'll second that motion.
Let's get the second, and then can we do under discussion?
Okay.
Okay, second.
Mahan, under discussion. Commissioner Rios.
I defer to you.
What about the light?
He said that. Light fixtures.
Does that include the?
We're asking them to come back and restudy the lights, both the wall sconce and the pole lights.
Okay, that's what. Yeah, thank you.
Okay.
End of discussion. I'll call a question. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? One opposition. Commissioner Mahan, I'm assuming for the same reasons.
You mean Lavoie?
I mean, God.
Really going to mess up that record, but
Really?
anyway.
Commissioner Lavoie. Abstain? Any abstentions? No? Okay, motion carries.
Thank you.
Did you get that complicated one? Sorry, I screwed that one up. Okay, I'm going to suggest that the commission take a 5-minute break.
Oh, wait, we're supposed to keep one, right?
Is that okay?
We'll take that.
Okay. We are recessed for 5 minutes.
You have this thing.
I'd rather have a half an hour.
Sunny side of the street.
Your lips were like a red and ruby chalice, warmer than the summer night. The clouds were like an alabaster palace, rising to a snowy height. Star its own aurora borealis. Suddenly you held me tight. I could see the midnight sun. I can't explain the silver rain that found me. Or was that a moonlit veil? The music of the universe around me. Or was that a nightingale? And then your arms miraculously found me. Suddenly the sky turned pink. pale, I could see the midnight sun. Was there such a night? It's a thrill I still don't quite believe. But after you were gone, there was still some stardust on my sleeve. The flame of it may dwindle to an ember, and the stars forget to shine, and we may see the meadow in December. I see white and crystalline, but oh, my darling, always I'll remember when your lips were close to mine, and we saw the midnight sun, the midnight sun.
Throw bouquets at me. Don't please my folks too much. Don't laugh at my jokes too much. People will say we're in love. Don't sigh and gaze at me. Your sighs are so like mine. Your eyes mustn't glow like mine. People will say we're in love. Don't start collecting things. Give me my rose and my glove. Sweetheart, they're suspecting things. People will say we're in love. Don't start collecting things. Give me my rose and my glove. Sweetheart, they're suspecting things. People will say, people will say, people will say we're in love.
Love makes me
-10, project last reviewed May 26, 2010. I will read those comments. It was continued to, excuse me. It was continued indefinitely with the following positive comments to the Planning Commission. The mass, bulk, and scale of the proposed addition are acceptable. The location and size of the trash enclosure is acceptable. Additional landscaping is requested. The details will be worked on after the development review is completed. At least 2 commissioners find the project supportable but have trouble with the lighthouse remaining as part of the project. The motion was made by Peugeot. It was seconded by Drury. It was a 6-2-0 vote. Boucher and Suding opposed. There was. Sharp was absent. The motion carried.
2010.
The motion was reopened in order to make compatibility analysis findings, and the motion carried. My goodness, there was a substitute motion. I beg your pardon, didn't realize it. The mass, bulk, and scale of the proposed addition is acceptable. The location and size of the trash enclosure is acceptable. Additional landscaping is requested, particularly more trees and more planting at the trash enclosure. The details will be worked on after the development review is completed. At least 2 commissioners find the project supportable but have trouble with the lighthouse remaining as part of the project. The project meets all 6 of the compatibility analysis requirements. The action was made by Peugeot, second by Drury. It was a 6-2-0 vote. Boucher, Suding opposed. Sharp was absent. Motion carried. Pretty much the same motion.
Okay.
All right. Please
Remember it?
give us your name for the record and a brief presentation.
Yes, I'm Richard Six from LMA Architects, and with me is Miss Ginny
Castanol
Hunter.
Welcome.
And
Nice to see you again. The 9th year in a row, I think, or something, isn't it?
yeah, she is the owner.
We've been coming for a long time.
Yeah.
She is the owner of the project. Previously, I've been working more directly with the city, but now I'm working directly with Ginny and am delighted.
And my children. I have 5 children. They're all co-owners.
So, for those that don't know the bigger picture, the whole essence of this project, and it's underway now, is that we're trying to disentangle the project from the bridge. The project, the structure actually hung on the old bridge and went over the creek, both which are absolutely no-nos and so forth. So, what's going to happen is that it was agreed that the building would be cut back to off of the bridge and in a decent setback to the creek, and in return for the loss of the area and the views, the building would grow a second floor, so we could give back to the Castanol as what was taken away and made whole again. We were here in 2010. We received positive reviews except for the few isolated things. We went to the Planning Commission and got good reviews. So we are back now, and we say that we're on for a design review, but it's been so long, and the Planning Commission and a lot of the commissioners have not seen the project. So if I was intending to do a second concept review. It depends on where you see we don't have all of our real details and fine work done that I would expect on a preliminary review, but we'll see how it goes. If there's any, does anybody need to see photographs of the project, or we know what it's all? You want to see photographs? So to update you. Apologize for these being so small, but let me go back to the site plan to give you a scoop on just what is involved. Ginny owns both of these pieces of property, and this adjacent parcel is being utilized as parking under agreement for the neighborhood, the State Street retail, as well as the enclosed trash area is being used at this point. Our project is on this site, and most of this will be done by the city except for the trash that will be done in this project, and some grading and so forth in front of the trash. So if we look at the photos, here is the view from State Street. Here is the adjacent retail. Here is a bit closer. This is that triangular parking lot. This is a view from up the creek, and this is where the project overhung and support itself on the bridge. Again, another photograph of that. The front, as you all know, there was a patio deck, one story, the lighthouse tower. Again, this is a little closer up of the unenclosed trash that's being utilized by the neighbors. And this is from Helena. This is the tower again, the Helena fronted. Elena elevation. And then this is the unscreened trash area.
Okay.
So what we are proposing doing
is turning the page. PR-2.
This is simply showing the complexities of the demolishing. They've already demolished what we call the gross demolishing that they're already working over there. Then second phase, we do more refined demolishing to actually accept the new portions of the building.
Page PR3.
So again, we're cutting that corner of the building off. It will be aligned with a respectful setback from the creek. We will be angling it, and I think you'll find it a lot of fun. We will be raising the floor area in the new area to appreciate better views and so forth. One of the consequences, and this is interior talk, but one of the consequences, it made the cutting this off made the kitchen and the restrooms very inefficient. So we're gutting the whole building, moving the restrooms, putting some upstairs and so forth.
HPR4.
This is the introduction of our new our new dining. We'll have an exterior patio on second floor, back and front stairs, and so forth.
HPR5.
So these are hard roof forms to understand, but we'll understand them more in the elevations. This part of the roof will remain, and new air conditioning. These sections, one of the good things is that the existing parapets for that low roof have 3 and 4 foot parapets that we will study when we actually get the equipment and so forth on it. But,
HPR7.
You'll see this. You'll see in my section where I've dropped the roof between the main dining, upstairs dining, and the tower. I've been able to drop that roof by a small girth and a much lower plate height.
HPR8.
I've also been able to bury the elevator within the roof forms, so I don't have I don't need to go and do a tower.
Nice. HPR9.
So here's where we've spent most of our time. These are. Let's start walking from. Well, let's go backwards. Let's go from the Helena, and we're proposing to put a metal screen, man gate, and service gates on that. We're looking at metal with some kind of river of life pattern on top of a steel surface.
So they're not see-through?
No, they're not see-through. They'll be solid, and then the whatever wrought iron decorative will be applied to that. These windows are the same. Most of this is the same. This is where we begin to get our 2 stories. One of the little quirks that I've been able to do, these windows were the French arch with a hard corner. Well, they're deeply recessed, So what I'm proposing is that these become elliptical arches that are, I think, more successful in the rest of the project. So we're trying to marry the and get the elliptical arch to be the typical form. One thing that we are going to do, here it is showing, the present a light tower has those, in my opinion, those funky nautical wood doors with the portholes and so forth. And I just, that's just a little too. I can't. What we're proposing anyway is to fill that in with glass and properly mullioned in steel and so forth, and introduce the new entry around the corner.
Good. Okay, so this becomes a window.
So that becomes a window.
Okay, and then where does your entry go?
So our entry is right adjacent to it as it turns the corner here with a recess. So this is that section I showed you where I was able to lower this roof with the low plate height, the low girth, the narrow girth. So this plays against the tower correctly, proportionate wise. And then this is the turn of following the creek. The main front stair is right here, so this window can be higher in relationship to the landing of the stair. These are the three main, at that angle, three main windows to the downstairs dining, and this will be the raised floor for the front dining. I like the windows proportions coming down to the ground, so these will be a subtle spandrel glass to help the proportions. And then upstairs, this is the upstairs additional dining. I want to get steel windows. I want this upstairs dining to be very open air, so I want to, have these steel glass doors completely open. Then turning the corner, this is parallel to this is straight on from the creek.
Right.
So it's just showing the proportions better. This will be a full balcony, so I can pick up more decoration and rather than having to yes. And then this
looking out on the old harbor.
Yeah, round columns set in between the openings. Here is the balcony. So as this rectangle drops back in again, we scoop out and have the open air balcony. And then I've been able to lower this because this is the descending stair, the back stair. And then we return to the old historic or the existing stuff. This is the trash area, again returning to the solid steel with the decorative wrought iron in front.
Explain what's happening with this roof form here and here.
Yeah, just this will be most of the roof will be shed up to the existing neighbor's wall, and I felt that was finesse it a little and drop that back and get a little peak there. I think it's more successful rather than a straight on shed.
Well, I'll ask that as a question later. Okay.
I think this was the shadow study.
PR10.
That's the shadow study that we did for the Planning Commission. It's very crude, so it's kind of old material now. But that's it.
Okay. That concludes your presentation.
Mr. Chair?
I will open public comment unless you are dying.
Public comment, no.
Okay. I actually see no speaker slips, so I will close public comment.
Just a bit of history. I wasn't here when it was last presented. I was here, however, when the lighthouse was approved. And David Gebhardt was sitting at this table, very much alive. Yeah, well, he's still here, by the way.
Last meeting, actually.
It could have been what killed him. No, we wrestled with this lighthouse for months and months and months. The woman who was responsible for wanting it was a passionate lighthouse aficionado. She had a Fresnel lens, and she had a collection, and she was from Cape Cod, and she wanted a lighthouse. And we wrestled with the fact that it was inland, nowhere near the water where the water had ever been. And she wanted, well, creep, that happens. And she wanted a Yankee lighthouse.
Are you a Southerner?
No, I'm a Yankee. I'm a Yankee. I spent time in the South. And after many months of debate, we compromised on this as being an appropriately Hispanic lighthouse, if somewhat misplaced, and allowed it to be built, and it's now become almost a feature of the waterfront, and no one seems to ask the question, what's it doing there? But so the previous comments about why keep it, I think it's worth keeping. It's, if nothing else, for the valiant effort that was put into having it. And the question would be, does any of her stuff still exist? Did Rusty's get that, or is it gone?
Well, you know, you'd have to ask the city. They sort of negotiated with Rusty's. It was enormously complicated because this took so many years.
Yeah.
So Rusty's just gave up. They left because they couldn't
they just left.
continue on this way.
That would be interesting.
And she has all that stuff still.
Yeah.
And what they're going to do with it, I don't know.
Yeah. So she has it, not the city.
Either she or her son.
Oh, okay. Because that would be really quite wonderful to reincorporate that.
Well,
into
perhaps
this
we
building.
could get our hands on some of it
It'd be-
again.
it'd be great.
We're very friendly with each other, so I'm sure that
great.
I'm sure we could arrange that.
And maybe some recognition of her.
Well,
Her
exactly.
passion and
yeah,
interest.
well, yeah, I know she really cared
Any
deeply
other
about
questions,
that.
Commissioner LeBoy?
No, that was all.
Commissioner Rios, any questions?
Just one question, and it may be displaying my ignorance, but are steel glass doors appropriate for this area?
Sure.
Yeah,
Yeah,
we use them all the
they
time.
are.
Yeah, it's a good.
And also in your design, you have taken into account the salt problem.
That's a good question. You know, whether we can do steel or whether we have to return to aluminum, you know, is still in. It's
That's something
an
that-
important question.
Yeah,
yes.
that.
And I did a
that's corrode.
purview. I did a survey of the windows down there, and there's all kinds. And we might be looking at aluminum, but certainly we will be sensitive to the bevels and the
Well, when the tsunami comes, the lighthouse will be appropriate.
Yes.
The water.
Commissioner Vena?
What's going to happen to the door that you're removing with the porthole?
You want
I haven't.
Maybe it'll be at the Maritime Museum or something.
Maybe.
Yeah,
That's a nice
good idea.
Why not?
Commissioner Murray, any questions?
No, I was just looking at this. So, are these same? These are just barrel tile.
Oh, yes.
It
Yeah,
just sort of look like pipes, but
No,
it's not.
I'll
Okay.
draw them in there for you.
They'll be very authentic and classic and randomly pumped and all that.
I have a few questions. You're not ready with the landscape yet.
No, that's
Okay.
That's correct.
The roof at the trash enclosure.
Back up a minute. I think that the landscape is actually part of the bridge project.
Well, I do remember reviewing that, and there was a small portion of landscape in front, by the front door, that I'd required a tree to be installed, or the
Oh, you mean the
existing
two palm trees?
The existing palms moved.
Yeah, I think there's been headway on that.
Mr. Gollett seems to recall as
something
well.
for us. There you have it.
It was these here, and replanted within 20 feet of their current location at the end of construction.
Philip, I don't know what happened. I've been
they haven't
on
been
that
stockpiled?
they've just sort of zapped out, and I lectured them profusely because they're letting them die, which makes me unhappy. I have about 40 palm trees that I hand water, and I don't understand why they're letting them die, and I've been very upset about it. So I'm glad you brought that up.
So the landscape then is bound by the Cabrillo Boulevard Bridge Replacement Project. Is that correct, Mr. Gullett? And so
Looks that way.
Chair Suding, that's all approved landscaping that would be installed after this project is built. And the city would install that landscaping. So this is what's approved, but if the commission feels changes are needed based on changes to this project, that would be appropriate. On the Kentia palms, my understanding from Public Works is they are attempting to protect them in place rather than remove and stockpile.
But they do have to water them.
Somebody should water them.
All right. Then the next question is the trash enclosure roof. Why? Well, just let me ask a question. Why not bring the alternate pitch all the way back instead of shedding part of it and opposing pitch? In other words, bring the pitch all the way back.
Well, you're going to collect a lot of water back there and have a lot of just drainage problems.
Waterproofing issues,
Yeah.
drainage. Okay, I get that. I don't know what the rest of the commission feels, but this door is now a door turning into a window that goes down to the ground is to me confusing. It looks like an entrance, and perhaps that should be filled in so that it is a window more in keeping with this window here.
Yeah.
Or that this stopped looking like a door somehow.
Which window where?
Some kind of planter.
Window here.
The tower.
Still's too hot.
In any case, you know, and that's a comment. So I really wanted to poll the commission, see if they felt the same way. Okay, that's that.
Does that door have a purpose?
Commissioner,
No, this
not
is no longer.
anymore.
That would be a window now.
So-
window.
No circulation.
Yes.
So I'll do comment based on what you just said, because I was going to phrase it as a question, just to ask Mr. Six if he had considered maybe having some sort of a sill there, just to signify that it is no longer a door. So I'll just state it as a preference. You know, I think to line it up, if you take the narrative that this was a lighthouse and then the lighthouse got revised, normally things don't line up like that in lighthouses, where this one sill here is going to line up with the sill over there.
No, right.
They typically
The stairs
evolve.
go up, yes.
So
Right.
I wouldn't think you would line up with that sill, but I do think that you might create a sill condition showing that it was probably a door that's now been infilled without going excessively high.
Excellent.
And so Santa Barbara does have its precedence of having funny lighthouses, because I worked on the Coral Casino project, and here you have another example of a funny lighthouse. I go there just because I'm mentioning it because the question about steel windows. Go take a look at what's at the Biltmore Hotel, because I think it has the same amount of exposure or closeness, salt air. Perhaps it's maybe even closer to the water. They have Hope's windows and doors, even on the main, like the patio off of the main portion of the building. And they're steel, so take a look at how they're doing.
Yeah.
That would be, you know, because steel to me is a preference.
Maintenance crew, how they
And the
them
Coral
up.
Casino, because I watch them all the time, and it takes a lot of work. And I'm wondering, I think at the Coral Casino, I think I don't know if it's aluminum or steel with the glass.
Steel,
Is
but
it
they
steel?
weren't properly galvanized. Apparently, they were supposed to be, but there was a problem. Steel windows have to be galvanized before they're painted by the water, and they are at the Biltmore.
Commissioner Mahan.
Yeah, the question on the south elevation, where it says raised floor and a dining room, but does that floor come right up to those windows, or how is that working?
That will be, Bill, that will be, Commissioner Mayhem, that will be spandrel glass. And then behind that, I've located it so after that, the first window mullion, there'll be a base on the inside.
Okay, that's my only question.
Okay. All right, let's go to comments then. Commissioner Vena, do you have any comments?
No.
Okay. You know what? I actually do have a question on the site plan. PR
1 or 2?
No one.
PR1?
Well, I think PR3 gets a little closer, doesn't it? A little bit of scale. Yeah. Where exactly are any opportunities for landscape? You've got maybe one here.
Yeah.
Okay. And one at the entry possibly, and then all of this, which is taken care of by the Cabrillo. Can we get some landscaping in here to help shield that trash enclosure?
Yeah, I don't. It's going to be problematic water-wise to serve that. It's going to be very problematic for sprinklering that. So we could look at that. I think that's an excellent idea.
Maybe it is plant material that doesn't necessarily require frequent watering, which is what we're trying to get towards anyway. Succulents, cactus type things. Wouldn't want to see a saguaro cactus there, but something else. Okay, that was my question and partial comment, and I'm sorry, Commissioner Vena.
Sorry to interrupt.
Go ahead.
How about some pots, perhaps? And maybe the comment was regarding the palm trees, but obviously they've been addressed, so.
Well, I think that one of the things we should consider doing is sending a message to the people who are supposed to maintain the Kencha palms that this is part of the approval and it's the city's responsibility to maintain them and they should do so.
If they don't, then they're going to have to replace them in kind.
And they're expensive.
They are.
So I think one of the things this commission should do is send a very clear message to them.
Mr. Collett would be happy to pass that along to Public Works, I believe.
I would. Okay.
Thank you.
Commissioner LaVoy?
I think it's a very nice proposal. The only thing that sticks out to me as being out of character is the Serliano window facing west.
Is it this window here?
Yeah. But if it didn't have the arch, I'd like it better.
It's supposed to look like a elliptical arch, but
Yeah, even then.
even then, okay.
Yeah, I'd like it better if it just went flat across and you had maybe a round window up above, higher. And the other would be it's not a strong objection, excuse me, but the windows going below the interior floor, but if you were to raise a plinth on the building, express it on the outside, the windows start at the floor and go up, would be fine by me.
In other words, that would shorten the proportion of those windows.
Yeah, so you run a base on the
here's the
building.
straight-on elevation. Here's the straight-on.
Yep.
I was just concerned, Bill, that the proportions would be squatty.
I don't know.
Borderline.
Commissioner Vena?
One more question. I don't see any lights or lanterns or anything. Is there any
No, we weren't prepared for.
Okay, that'll be forthcoming.
No, I see.
Okay, Commissioner Murray?
No, it's very nice, and all those comments are good comments. I really like the way you've done the building.
Commissioner Winnick?
Yeah, I was trying to evaluate Commissioner LaVoy's comment on this.
Which one?
The last one about the windows. Interestingly enough, they look a little tall to me, but I think if when the full sill to where the floor is, they'd then start looking a little shorter. So I'm wondering if maybe it's just this line that's occurring. I don't know if you can see my finger. Yeah. Yeah, maybe that line is where the sill should be. And you still get your lower panels to keep your proportion, but maybe they don't look quite as exaggerated in height. And I'll leave that up to you, but that's just kind of my observation.
Folks, the only caveat is that this window here is after an exit, so it has to come down.
Onto the
Well, that's interesting to know.
It
It might be okay.
Bill, it's
not an important suggestion. Let me put it that way.
So whatever your preference is, Mr. Six. Okay?
Yeah, I think
Either
that's
would be
fair.
appropriate.
Yeah. All right.
And I also just wanted to say I think it's a really nice
door
proposal.
opening. Oh, yeah, I see a door there, yeah. Right.
Commissioner May had any comments?
Yeah, I would like for the applicant to study getting rid of the spandrel glass, and it's already been talked about. So, and I'm supporting that. I think that it might be the breakup of the vertical mullion, having the 4 instead of 3 panels. If you had instead of having 3 verticals, you would maybe only have 2 verticals, and that will change the proportions of those windows once you shorten them. I think it's something you need to study. I think that the door here that you're talking about in the end, if that one comes down to the floor, maybe that's a nice variety.
Yeah,
that these would be filled in, and the filling in where the tower. Absolutely, I think that should be filled in, and maybe with a sloping sill. I think that window is set back too deep, that it should maybe be in the middle of that wall, and on the inside there could be a little ledge where you could put some pots with some flowers in them or something. And generally speaking, I think it's a very nice project. I'm curious why on the west elevation we have tile wrapping around the gable end of this one, and then on the other one it looks like there's
rafter tile.
Yeah, a board or something. Why didn't
that will be full
tile coming around? Okay, that's just the computer.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to point out, and I'm glad I'm the last person, so I could hear all of your comments. I just wanted to point out that this entrance is 15 feet high by my scale. It is a big entrance. We've been looking at big entrances this afternoon. This one didn't seem to bother anybody because of the way the glass is broken up, and it has human scale because of that. Nice project.
Pointing that out.
Nice project.
All right. Would somebody like to summarize the comments and make a motion? I think my sense is that we could give this project design approval.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Can we?
As requested.
Oh, it was requested. Okay, great.
It's agendized.
All right, so I'd like to make a motion for. Don't forget landscaping. Okay, well, you can chime in.
I will.
So, I'm sorry. Project design approval, then that's the motion for that. With return for final approval, would you just like it to be indefinite, or would you like to come back in 2 weeks?
Oh, no, indefinite, yeah.
Okay, so indefinite to return for final.
Great.
And the comments are actually fairly few. At the
excuse me,
the Lighthouse Tower, consider putting in a sill that slopes to the windows and moving the window perhaps closer to the edge of the fenestration, maybe splitting the amount of depth in
where the
half.
existing door is being replaced.
Yeah.
Okay, where the door is being replaced, correct. To study the condition on the southwest elevation of the transom panels that are, or not transom, I'm sorry, the spandrel panels, to look at the proportion of those and whether or not you would keep the spandrel panels or infill them and allow the door that's adjacent to have a different, which is on the south elevation, I believe, to have a different height going down to the sidewalk. To change the window on the west elevation, that's a Palladian style, sort of Palladian window, to be straight across all 3 bays with a round window above, and to, on the landscape.
To maximize the landscape, specifically near the trash enclosure, the proposed trash enclosure, and
on Helena.
On Helena at the tower.
And I think that's everything.
Let's make the additional comment that the remainder of the landscape is handled with the Cabrillo Bridge replacement project, so that doesn't get lost.
Yeah.
And can I go back and just change one thing? I think, if you're okay, Commissioner Lavoie, I'd like to allow the applicant to study that south elevation. Was it south?
That's fine with me.
Yeah,
That's fine with me.
Rather than dictating it, to study
You mean the Palladian? The Palladian.
Palladian window to study.
It's actually the west elevation.
Sorry, that's the west to study on the west elevation the alternative.
So did you get that to revise that comment to not say Palladian window and add a round window, but just to say study a different configuration of window or fenestration there?
Yeah, I'll second the motion.
Okay. Well, I had a motion by Winnick, a second by Mahan. Under discussion, is there any discussion? No.
Yeah, we should start our comments with the commission supports the design and finds it acceptable and commendable.
I'd be happy to add that to the motion. Did you hear that?
Thank you.
And finds them commendable, in fact.
Well, let's not. Are you okay with that, Commissioner Mahan?
Yes.
Okay. I'll call the question. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Suiting? Abstain? Suiting opposes on the basis of the lighthouse tower remaining. It would be such a much.
There you go, Richard.
Okay.
Nice.
Beautification.
Don't you think Santa Claus should be back in Sandyland?
There's a lot of energy when you
Walt Disney
I
spent
think we went
ton of
through that,
years on
didn't we?
Disneyland.
Yes.
Yeah, we went through a lot.
Look, if the children
monument
can
to
have it,
persistence, if nothing else.
they should take their light tower.
Oh, thank you.
We're trying to get this done before I die.
Okay.
I'm getting pretty old.
I want to remind the commission that we are 30 minutes behind. This is final review. It's item number 5, 715 Chapala Street. The final approval of architectural details is requested. Project was last reviewed December 17th, 2014. I will need to read those comments, but I don't have them, so I won't read them.
Oh, maybe I have them. Which project is this? What number?
Item 5, it was last reviewed on December 17th.
No, I don't have it.
Thank you. Thank you.
Item 5.
Oh, okay.
Good. How are you?
Good.
Great.
Mr. Winnick found them. Whatever. All right. This was last reviewed then on December 17th with the comments. It did receive project design approval. It was continued indefinitely for the details with the conditions to restudy the black steel planters and the window on the south elevation. The window on the south elevation facing Ortega Street should not have tile below it. The motion was made by Sharp. It was seconded by Murray. It was a 6-0-0 vote. Arias, Schallenberger, Winnick were absent. The motion carried. All right, please introduce yourselves for the record and give us a brief presentation.
Thank you. Mr. Chair, members of the commission, my name is Michael Holliday. The architects for the project, this is Jerry Roche. He's the project manager working with us on this. So this is for Kanaloa Seafood, 715 Chapala Street.
Welcome.
And thank you. Basically, we followed through and have done everything you've asked for. You've already approved the design in concept, so I'll just kind of dial down on the things that we have changed since then. So we're here with some details, and we got colors and material boards to kind of walk you through. So I'll show you the whole set of construction documents here. Flip through some of the outline specifications. You guys have seen all this, existing photos. Survey of the, as you recall, it's the existing discount brake and muffler shop. California Green Code.
Sorry,
standards. Yeah, you can give me one at a time. You guys will need to see a lot of that. The exterior patio will be coming back by the owner.
I'm sorry if I gave you a paper
No, it's
cut.
okay. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, rooftop equipment.
We could talk about rooftop equipment. We've located that for the food service down below. There's a screen that we've got that's going around that we can show you on here that we were thinking. It's a single ply membrane roof, so this is a pre-manufactured material that actually meets the requirements for the ventilation for the different equipment on there. So we were thinking that should match the color of the roof. That's why we're proposing that. So
Which color? What is the color of the roof?
it's a off-white cream color.
White. Okay.
We should also note that this is tucked down below like a 3-foot parapet as well.
Yeah, everything's concealed behind a 3-foot parapet.
Okay.
This is what you guys have seen before. We changed it last time. We got the details on the planners, and we've changed this from sort of a black to a bronze colored sections, little twisted steel rod detail, and then this is that wood element with the trellis that shades that glazing all the way across the front. Here's a little bit more of the details, the twisted steel rod. We've got these clavos. Here's the detail that was requested last time, that for the little steel planters.
Okay, good. Okay.
And the clavos that we have, they're sort of A and B, kind of an interesting.
What color are those? You're just going to let them color naturally?
Actually, we've got them called out there. It's that bronze. Yeah, right here. Dunn Edwards. They call it a black bay, but it's a bronze color, right?
It's not black. It's more like a mix between that deep gray and bronze.
And the rest is structural, I think.
Okay. Did you point out the tile at the base of the window?
Good point. Yeah, that was something that Commissioner Sharp on his last comment made, which we agreed with. This had tile down below it, and we eliminate. So his comment was that should match, and as it wraps the corner, we agreed with him.
Okay. Conclude your presentation?
That's it.
Okay. I looked at the landscape. I'm fine with that. I'll open public comment. Any public comment? I see no speaker slips. I'll close public comment, bring it to the commission for questions. Anybody have any questions?
Yes, Mr. Chair.
Yes, Commissioner LaVoy.
Page A5.0, you detail 1B.
Let me get there.
Section of the trellis.
Okay.
The purlins are continuous?
Yes.
And you're going to core through them for the turnbuckle?
Well, they actually stop. Oh, yeah, the little right where those things come down. It's interesting condition. That just notches to allow for that little turnbuckle where it happens to pass through. So it's just a 3/4 inch steel rod. So we're just going to cut that down and let that pass right through. The dilemma here.
You've thought about it. Fine, thank you.
Yeah.
And that's the only one that gets cut, is that single one.
So our thinking was you're not going to. It's kind of a nice integration of structure.
Okay. Any other questions, Commissioner LaVoy? Anybody?
I have one.
Yes, Commissioner
And I know it's in a 3-foot well, but I think we're also. This is more about the next project that comes in front of us with a similar solution. We're not.
You're talking about the screening?
Yeah. So, did you look at some other alternative to the screening that would make it a little less industrial looking?
We were initially thinking about something that would look more like a louvered type of a thing. This was just something that's made for this. That's a pre-manufactured. Happy to study that, and come back with something that I don't necessarily like the look of that either. So something maybe that's a little bit more like a staggered louver type of situation. Maybe probably more expensive, but it'll probably look nicer.
This kind of looks like a beehive or a citrus carrier.
It's all down below the parapet, but since there's the second floor, look at those other buildings.
Yeah, and then someday somebody will come in front of us with another picture of this saying, hey, you did this before.
Understood. No, I think that's a good comment. We'd be happy to look at some sort of a louvered system that's a little bit more elegant.
Okay. Any other questions?
Mr. Chair, is this new stucco on here, or is it old stucco?
It's all new plaster over the existing building. So it's
The existing building is a concrete block, right?
They're existing as concrete block, and there's plaster on portions of the building as well. So we're plastering the entire finish to match, so it's all consistent.
Okay.
Okay. How about any comments? Anybody have any comments?
Well, there was one about.
I made one comment.
Okay.
Yeah, so
I'm sorry, Commissioner Mahan or Commissioner LaVoy, what did you comment?
Well, there was sort of a question about the fish.
Oh, the
Is that a mural?
Oh, the fish went away.
Yeah, okay.
Still in your rendering.
No, I know. It's just a graphic image.
Okay, well, we can clear that up in the motion.
There is no fish.
The ghost fish, the passerby.
Okay. Any other comments?
Mr. Chair?
Yes, Commissioner
I think it'd be
Mahan?
nice if this is new plaster, that the corners would be soft and not be hard.
Which sheet are you on?
Well, there's no detail on the corners of the stucco, but I think it's nice in El Pueblo Viejo if the corners of the stucco are soft, rounded, rather than
What do you have to do? Knock off the CMU edges of the CMU to make that?
No, you put in a little. No, you just.
Because we only have a skim coat. We're just skim coating the block.
Oh, you're just skim coating it, huh? So this isn't really not a true detail then in terms of that stucco being cross-hatched in there. It looks like it's about an inch thick.
It's going to be, we're just skim coating the existing block.
You're talking about this detail here?
Yeah.
New smooth coat masonry
Decorative
style
steel.
integrated
Yeah, smooth coat, that's exactly what
color plaster, but it's only going to be a skim coat.
Yeah, right now, I mean, that's a good point, Bill. If we were going to plaster the whole building and we had an inch to play with, I would agree with you, but there's no way to deal with that, other than we have to come in and ease all the edges of the CMU.
No, I didn't. It didn't look like a skim coat.
Yeah,
on that
no, we're just going to do a skim coat over the existing CMU that's been there for 40 years.
Okay.
Just build up the skim coat a little bit and make it undulate. No?
No.
Let it go.
Thanks. We got enough of that going on.
Yeah.
All right. Any other comments?
Something else.
Anybody? Okay. I'll.
What is the color of the wall?
Is there any?
Here it is. Cream.
Yeah. And you were good with the landscape.
I was good with the landscape.
Okay, great. Do we need to make a motion? Oh, somebody's going to.
Mr. LeBoy?
I make a motion for final approval.
Second.
Wasn't there something that needed to return on consent?
The louver.
Just
The louver. Thank you. The screening.
Has the lighting been covered?
We did look at the lighting.
That lighting fixture is curious.
Yeah,
it's all hidden.
It's all hidden in the trellis.
Yeah, I'm good with that.
The question is it, Mr.
We
Chair?
have a motion. Somebody's making a motion, so I'll have to get you under discussion.
Well, for final approval, I guess with the mechanical equipment screening to come back to consent.
And the approval does not include the fish graphic.
Yeah.
Okay, second.
Okay. Under discussion then, Commissioner Mahan.
No, it's okay.
All right. Okay. Then I'll call the question. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstain.
Abstain.
One abstention?
Two.
Two abstention. That would be Commissioner Vena and Commissioner Rios. Abstain. Okay?
Thank you.
So you understand what you need to do?
Yes, we did.
Okay.
Thank you very much. Appreciate
You're
it.
done.
Did we catch up?
Yeah, you keep that one, I guess.
Yeah, you can have it.
20 minutes behind now.
Keep that in the two images.
They want a big one.
Yeah.
Okay, next item on the agenda is item 6, which is 1220 Chapala Street. This is a new item. Action may be taken if sufficient information is present. This is a proposal to replace existing post-style bicycle racks with new hoop-style bicycle racks at City Parking Lot 5 and in sidewalk locations at the intersection of Chapala and De La Guerra to increase the capacity of bicycle parking and to consider hoop-style bicycle racks as a secondary city-approved bicycle rack design in areas of high demand. And I'm going to ask for your indulgence, but I do need to reopen item 5 and make the announcement that our approval, item 5, 7:15, Mr. Holliday, please listen. We reopened this item, that this item is, our approval is subject to appeal to the City Council within 10 days of today's date. Okay? All right, now we'll go back to item 6.
Perfect. Thanks.
Thank you, Chair Suding, members of the Commission. Peter Brown of your Public Works Transportation staff. This is actually two separate locations, a similar concept in each, replacement of city-approved hitching posts with hoop-style racks. You certainly are welcome, just for the record, to take action separately. The main issue that's happening is at these two locations, we are seeing a couple of things. Very high demand for bicycle parking and kind of an ineffective current storage device in the sense that the bikes are not able to stay in a particular location without being knocked over. We're also seeing kind of a lack of utilization of the existing space. For example, in the pictures that I'm about to show you, you'll see that the spacing of the hitching posts is 3 to 4 feet, when in reality it should be a bit closer in terms of a capacity standpoint. I think the original thought was you want to have space for people to get in and out and be able to get to their bikes, and I believe that the new proposed design does that. So from a visual standpoint, let's go ahead and show these photos, probably more important than the plans. So this is a photo taken at Chapala Street where De La Guerra intersects some people go there to have Eureka Burgers or California Pizza Kitchen. This is a photo taken before any of the businesses open at about 8 o'clock in the morning. And basically what we're having is a lot of employees are traveling to work by bicycle, and they're taking up that capacity early in the morning. And so when customers come traveling by bicycle, they're finding difficulty having capacity there. The reason why this is another proposal is that understanding the aesthetics of the approved hitching post design, you really can't see the hitching posts in these locations where there's really high demand. What you see are a cluster of bicycles. So the next photo shows what it would be like, the change with the hoop rack design. And we would replace about 5 hitching posts with 8 or 9 hoop racks. And so then we get that 40 to 50% increase in capacity. That's the location at the intersection of De La Guerra and Chapala. Further up Chapala Street, the city is undergoing renovations and changes at Lot 5. I know Victor Garza, superintendent and parking manager, is here to speak to this issue if you'd like. But there is a location there where hitching posts exist, and it's corralled by a hedge that we don't quite know. I mean, you guys have probably reviewed this project already, but there will be some changes there. The idea here, again, is that there's 4 hitching posts, in my opinion, ill-spaced. We would replace those with 6 or 7 hoop racks, and the bicycles then we'd have more bicycle parking in this location. And the last item that you read in terms of the purpose is that on a case-by-case basis, transportation staff would like your direction on whether or not we should be coming back with similar proposals in terms of replacement of hitching posts. I know that design originally came out of the renovation of State Street, and there was a desire to have that hitching post and the historic style along State Street, and we certainly aren't proposing any of those changes there. But to me, in these particular locations, these are suitable transportation alternatives. And so that concludes my presentation, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Okay, I have 3 speakers. One speaker slip and 2 letters. So I'm opening public comment. First will be Hillary Blackerby. Ms. Blackerby, would you please come up to the table?
Not used to people commenting from this close. I am Hillary Blackerby. I'm on the city's Transportation and Circulation Committee, and also here, I'm wearing 2 hats, also here on behalf of Assemblymember Doss Williams' office, is also supportive of this project, to say we're very supportive, and I'm very supportive of these hoop racks in those locations. I think so far I've seen the one place where they are in the city at the bike corral on Canon Perdido. Very well used, fits in, looks nice. And in these places I've noticed, especially at Chapala, just a ton of bikes, no matter what time, all blocking up the current spacing. And like Mr. Brown said, that's at 8 a.m., right, before any customers even arrive. So I think they look nice, they fit in, and what's more historic than a bicycle in El Pueblo Viejo? So I really encourage approval of this, and also hoping that it doesn't always have to come back on a case-by-case basis when it seems like the appropriate tool for the job. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for coming. Next is a letter from Cynthia Bush, acting chair of the Transportation and Circulation Committee. She is a bike rider. She applauds the initiative that staff is taking. She feels that there are serious bike parking shortages on Chapala at De La Guerra and at parking lot 5. She believes that the hoop design proposed is much easier to use and more secure. They've seen a dramatic increase in bicycle usage in Santa Barbara. They recognize the importance of this and the pedestrian infrastructure improvements. And they've addressed them in their very first policy, the transportation infrastructure enhancement and preservation, assess current and potential demand for alternative transportation, and where warranted, increase the availability and attractiveness of alternative transportation by improving related infrastructure and facilities without reducing vehicle access. So she feels that the proposal does exactly that, and she encourages us to approve it without delay. I also have an email from Jackie Armstrong. She is addressing Peter Brown. Yes, she's mentioned that when the bike racks are full, they have to her staff has to lock up bicycles on State Street, and there's notable bike theft there. She's hoping that this becomes a reality. She's sure that her staff and guests would greatly appreciate it, and she's the general manager of Eureka Restaurant Group at 601 Paseo Nuevo. And then I got a late request for a speaker, and that is Mr. DeForest. Mr. DeForest.
Yeah, I would just like to, looking at that picture.
Which one?
The photograph that's on the wall.
Which one?
To the
one that's up there right now.
That one?
Yes. I hope the commission or whoever cites these bicycle corrals considers the pedestrian traffic, and it seems to me, just looking at that picture, that some of those, maybe if those bicycle, if the racks could be not quite so much in the public sidewalk or public right-of-way, that would be an improvement. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Mr. DeForest. I'll close public comment and ask Mr. Brown. I'm assuming that meets all of Public Works dimensioning and circulation element, pedestrian master plan, all of those clearances that are required.
It does, and if there's one of those concerns that rises to the top, it is indeed pedestrian and ADA access. At this particular location, what happens is bicycles are really the limiting factor more than the racks themselves. With the reinstallation, if we were to put in the hoop racks, I'd have a chance to move the hoops a little closer to the curb edge. And that would actually widen the pathway for ADA access and pedestrians that are walking along the sidewalk there. Well, even with the bike parked there, yeah.
Okay. Then I'll bring it to the commission for questions. Any commissioners have any questions?
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
Well, I just following up on what Mr. DeForest suggested about pedestrian, and you're talking about it too, and I'm looking at the drawing here.
Which one?
303. You know, it's 8 feet to the hoop, and of course the bicycle sticks out a lot further than the hoop, even when they're moved 2 feet from the curb. I assume that 2 feet would put the front wheel just about on the curb, and so there'd be 2 feet on the back side too, which would cut that pedestrian way down to 6 feet. And I'm just curious as to if, the problem is because there's existing outdoor dining right in that particular area there, and that maybe there's a place to locate these where they wouldn't be adjacent to existing outdoor dining, so that the pedestrian way wouldn't be cut down to 6 feet, which personally I think is not adequate. And I guess I turned the question into a comment.
Does anybody else have any other questions?
Well, I would like to tag on to that maybe one of the things to look at, because the hitching post, one could angle their bicycle, right? With these, you can't angle your bicycle when you park it. And I'm saying that people do angle their bicycles on the hitching post. They usually just follow some random pattern. But you know, there is a lot of times you'll see on parking where you'll have it at an angle rather than perpendicular. So I'm going to just ask that question. Have you guys studied that as a possibility?
Hoops on an angle.
Yeah, if the hoops were on an angle, that would maybe generate more space on the sidewalk.
I wouldn't honestly be able to say we studied that, but it certainly is an option. We could orient the racks any which way. And again, just to be clear, the current proposal shifts the center of the hoop racks closer to the curb and opens the sidewalk greater than the existing condition. So anyone, I think, who would be concerned about the pedestrian access would support the shifting of those. The other nice thing about this is because we still have demand for hitching posts, what I would do is take out the ones that are there, I'd put them back in our city stock, and we could use those in other places where the hitching posts are requested and appropriate. But orienting them at an angle would open up even more width, and I think that the user outcomes would be the same. And the last thing I'll say is in terms of the patio for Eureka, we could certainly take 2 from this end, and there's a little bit of room to put them down on this end. We do start getting into the crosswalk area, so I have to be careful with the ADA curbs. But that's a consideration.
Commissioner Mahan brings up a good point in that, 6 feet there, even 7 feet, even 8 feet in my mind is a real pinch. I mean, State Street, we want 10 feet and 14 feet in some places. So I would take a look at angling those, as Commissioner Winnick said. Also placing maybe 2 or 3 of them up here where they'll fit, and possibly even placing 2 or 3 down here where there's not that pinch point of the outdoor dining area. I don't think anybody has any issues with the replacement of the hitching posts at Lot 9. Correct me if I'm wrong.
I did have one more question.
Okay. Okay.
But
nobody has
I
an
agree
issue
with you on that. I have no issue.
Lot 9. Go ahead, Mr.
Lot
Minnick.
5? Are you talking about Lot 5?
Did I say Lot? Yeah. Okay, Lot 5.
Victoria Street.
So my follow-up question is, did you study a different color than the Malaga green for the...
Is that a trick question?
Well, I mean, I could say, have you studied black instead of Malaga green?
No, we have been, in all honesty, fearful to broach that topic, but we are certainly open to any color suggestions.
We paint everything Malaga.
I know that, but you know what? I'm going to follow up with a comment, just because we'll be efficient this way. Looking at the rack, the corral that's over at Sojourner, in front of Sojourner, Ken and Perdido, I find that in that case, the Malaga green really sticks out because your bicycle tires are black typically, and because
not anymore. They're now red.
Oh, whatever.
Orange,
but the street architecture is different than like the hitching posts and things that are to park your bicycle. I personally think it would recede more if it was black and be less of a feature. That's just my own observation. So that's why I asked the question. And if it were only up to me, I would do black and not Malaga green.
How about we try it black in Lot 5 and Malaga green or vice versa? I don't know. What does the rest of the commission feel?
We spent a lot of time coming up with those.
Malaga green,
yeah, but that's good for street posts and other things.
Black is ugly.
Well, I'd like to see them something a little bit more fun. I mean, they're obviously modern, okay?
All right, well, the Malaga green is not good in those things.
Red.
Red? Go for red?
Bright yellow.
Mr. Chair, we just had a lot of fun with the Edison cabinet, and I don't want to have any more fun with bike racks.
How about like a dark bronze?
I would like. I think that a dark gray. A dark gray like the ironwork on the courthouse would be acceptable. I think Malaga green is nice, but I think we could have a couple of other colors too. Dark gray and a dark brown would be okay. I think we should set a minimum width for pedestrian way so that the people that are doing this have what is acceptable. 6 feet is not acceptable.
Hey, do you want to make a motion?
I think it's hard to.
Speaking about.
First of all, I want to talk about. I want to get the other commissioners' feelings about what is an acceptable width for pedestrians, even if the Chapala sidewalk is obviously not used like State Street sidewalk, but there ought to be some minimum width that is acceptable to us. I would suggest that 8 feet would be a minimum.
Mr. Chair?
Commissioner Lavoie.
That's set forth in the Chapala Street guidelines.
I don't
Minimum
think
width?
so. It's
Yeah.
set forth in the pedestrian master plan.
Okay.
Not in, and the pedestrian master plan addresses it as such, the intensity of use and the width of the right of way. That's how the clear zone comes up. And Mr. Brown, I'm sure you better be aware of the pedestrian master plan. But what is it in the pedestrian master plan for this size right of way?
It's 6 feet is the minimum that's in the pedestrian master plan. What I can commit to on this project is exceeding that. I haven't studied, as you mentioned, the angled parking. I don't know how much that could get, but my feeling is there's plenty of room to get 7 or 8 feet there.
I think 8.
But that's clear to the bike rack, not clear to the bike.
No, clear to the bicycle, the edge of
To
the
the
average-sized
tire.
bicycle.
Okay, because that's what we're looking
Well,
for.
I would make a motion to approve this application as submitted with the condition that the pedestrian way will not be less than 8 feet clear, and that we could study several other colors besides Malaga green, including a dark gray and a dark brown.
I'll second that.
Okay, we had a
Begins
motion.
the motion.
Okay, we had a motion by Mahan, second by Winnick. Under discussion, Mr. Lavoie.
I think we should pick a color and let them get on with this. Just pick a color.
Red.
What color would you like?
Red.
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 Dark gray.
Dark gray.
I'm good with a dark
What
gray.
would the applicant like?
Well, I personally, I'm interested in something that fits in with the paseo. For me, that's
governing.
That's a color like terracotta red. For me, that would look nice. I don't actually have a strong preference whether it's black or dark gray or brown or Malaga green.
I think terracotta
let's
red
think
would
about
be very
maintenance.
interesting.
Okay.
If it's
Under
pink-
discussion. Any more discussion on the color?
Let's think about maintenance.
Okay.
If it's painted red, it's painted that color, and it's scratched by the bicycle, et cetera, it's going to have to be repainted, et cetera. You'd be better off with a color that's more subdued.
Right.
And I think that
just gonna
Mr.
say
Winnick made a good point with his discussion about it fitting in there.
Tires.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I
Chair
could go
Sudi.
dark gray or that area. But
Okay. We
let's
have
think
we have
about
we have a
maintenance.
motion. Let's just see if it passes then. And the motion is dark gray or dark brown. All in favor of the motion?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstain? Motion carries.
Okay.
It would have been
Go to work.
so much more fun.
No, I mean, I'm good with that color. It's
No,
just
we
that
need
I'd
to
like
tile
that
them.
Commissioner LeRoy wanted to give them direction. Now they still have to come back and study it.
No,
kick
no,
it.
no, no.
Well,
No, it's either or.
Okay, great. Okay, then I'm
The final approval?
I'm sorry.
then
this
I'm
is-
in favor too.
yeah,
Okay,
this is final approval
okay.
with those comments.
I think it'd be lovely.
This action is appealable to the City Council within 10 days of today's date. Motion, or I'm sorry, meeting
Here, you get
adjourned.
a picture too.
We'll fly away. And he'll kiss your lips
wonder why I'm not myself of late. I'm feeling strangely great. I wonder why. I suppose some genius could explain why I walk in the rain. Just let 'em try. I